6:01 p.m. Welcome everybody. Super excited to be here. I find the front end of the packet here. May we have roll call?
From the city of Winters,
Present.
County of Yolo,
Present.
city of Davis,
Present.
city of West Sacramento. The absent, city of Woodland, not here, and at large.
Present. Present.
Thank you. Just a reminder to everyone, please use your mics for the people watching at home if you have any, and for the recording.
And we will take a second for the newest member to get situated. To arrive, and while we're taking a minute for him to get situated and arrive, I see we have a new advisory committee member. Hello. Maybe you'd like to take a second to introduce yourself.
Hi everyone, my name is Lulu. So I represent the city of Davis. I have lived in Davis since 2011. Sorry, I'm a little late today. And yeah, I use when I was a student at UC Davis, I used a lot of public transportation. Yeah, I'm very interested in contributing however I can to maybe adjust or improve the public transportation within our area. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do you have a roll call for Dr. Steven?
City of Woodland. Thank you.
Thank you very much. With that, we'll go to item number 2. Comments from the public regarding matters that are not on the agenda, but are within the purview of the Yolo Transportation District. Comments are limited to 2 minutes per person. Please identify yourself and the community in which you live before providing your comments. And with that, are there any public comments for items not on the agenda? I do not see a stampede. Or is there anyone online that would wish to make comments?
No comments online.
No comments on that. Will close comments from the public, and we will go on to consent calendar. If I have any corrections to the consent calendar,
Madam Chair, no corrections.
any comments from members? I have one. We'll get there. So the last meeting was Stephen Streeter's last meeting, and we adjourned in his honor, and that did not make it into the minutes. So if we could make that correction, I would appreciate that. Any other corrections to the minutes?
Oh, I do have a question. Going back to the first page, I was wondering, are we still recruiting one more at-large citizen advisory committee member?
Yeah, I was planning to cover this in my executive director's report at the end, but actually, we're gonna be recruiting 2.
Yeah,
because
we're giving him side eye today.
Yes, because committee member Andy Carrillo is gonna be leaving us, and I'll just take this opportunity to thank him for his service on behalf of staff, for always holding us accountable and providing really good insights, and we're gonna miss you, and we wish you all the best in San Diego.
Thank you, and it's been an honor to serve for the past several years, and I've definitely learned a lot from learned a lot from you all, and I've enjoyed the chance to work with you all and serve the county, and especially those who use transit here. So really appreciate it. Thanks so much.
So Andy, did you get a new job, Madam Chair?
Could we continue the minutes, please?
Oh, sure. Sorry.
Do I have a motion to approve minutes with the correction?
So
And a second,
Second.
is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes. The clerk show that Patrick is here. Yay, Patrick. Oh, good. We're all gonna grill Andy when we get to CAC meeting.
Sure.
Okay.
Thank you.
And that's gonna take us on into regular calendar, item number 4. And that's to receive an update on the Yolo Active Transportation Corridor Project and to discuss particular segments to advance the design. phase. And representative Mary Beth.
Good evening, Chair Baker, committee members. My name is Brian Evanak, Planning Director for Yolo Transportation District. Thank you for the opportunity to present this item to you tonight. It relates to the Yolo Active Transportation Corridors Project, which we've been working on for the past couple of years. We've made substantial progress on this project and are at an important milestone for the project we've known has been coming for a while. And we're excited to build on the momentum that we've generated with this project and advancing real projects from the planning process. So today's presentation will focus on accomplishments since our last project update to you in July of last year. But before we start, I do want to recognize the efforts of our capable project manager, Brenda Lomely, is here in the audience. I'm covering for her in terms of the item tonight, but Brenda's an assistant planner with us and has been responsible for the day-to-day management of the project, including grant funding, reporting and compliance, managing our consulting team, and hosting or participating in over 35 different events in 2 outreach phases to promote this project. Brenda's made significant professional strides as a result of this project, and as her supervisor, I'm very proud of her work. And I'd also like to introduce Adrian Engel. He's with our consulting team, Fair and Peers. He'll assist with a presentation specifically on the more technical project aspects. And with those opening remarks complete, let's take a look at why we're here today. And when we get to the right slide. That's it. All right, so 2 things we're going to talk about today. The first one is an update on the project accomplishments since our last update to you in 2024. That's going to be a little bit of review of our phase 2 outreach that we conducted. We'll also go over the development of the preliminary corridors and evaluation criteria that we've established for the project, and then also some of the results of the prioritized corridors. But the action that we're asking from you today is to affirm 2 segments as the preferred segments to advance to a design phase in coordination with local and state agency representatives. And just to cut the chase and remove any mystery, the 2 segments that we're looking for your support on are the segment between Madison and Esparto, connecting those 2 communities, and then another segment connecting Davis and Woodland. And we can go through those in more detail, but just so you know what we're queuing up for you, we'll move on to the next slide. So phase 2 outreach was what we spent a lot of time working on in the fall and through, I want to say, January and February. So the goal of that public outreach was to share with the communities that we went out to in phase 1, that we heard what they had to say, and that to get their feedback on some of our ideas for defining alignments for corridors in between the communities, as well as recommendations for improvements within the unincorporated communities themselves, because that was also scope of this work as well. All right, next slide. I mentioned earlier, there was lots of outreach. It's very difficult to conduct community outreach on this type of geographic scale, because you need to reach as many populated areas as you can. So this included 11 community open houses. That was the format for phase 2. And we also held a pop-up event at the food bank resource fair in Woodland. Next slide, please. We also had an online engagement tool. So for those who needed to digest the information at the open houses, or for those who couldn't participate, we had an online tool that gave them the opportunity to just go right into the maps and identify places where they felt like there were safety concerns, or routes that they think would make sense to connect communities with each other. So that tool was well utilized. We had over 135 inputs to that map. Whatever you want to do. So I think this one was my slide too. So unsurprisingly, we heard some, real concerns about, but opportunities about, the prospects for active transportation. So there's concerns about safety for people walking, bicycling, and rolling. This has to do with the fact that many of these corridors are on higher speed, higher volume county roads, or even within their own communities. There isn't a whole lot of traffic calming, there isn't even a whole lot of basic, basic infrastructure for walking or bicycling. So there was excitement for safer crossings, more sidewalks, traffic calmings, bikeways, and things like that. We also did experience, in some communities skepticism about, the value of bike paths, and partly because of perceptions of conflicts with agricultural activities that need to occur throughout the year. And so, now I'm gonna turn it over to Adrian, because this next slide, go ahead and advance it. This sort of shows, we start to get into more of the technical analysis and some of the factors that Adrian and his team considered when making recommendations for, within communities and also connecting the communities.
Yeah, so as a reminder, the plan's really gonna serve two purposes. One will be as the active transportation plan for Yolo County. So it'll check the box to be able to allow the county to apply for active transportation funding through the state's program. So many of the maps and information that we shared were at the community level. So we presented 8 different community maps in each of those 11 workshops that we proposed or that we conducted, and got a lot of feedback on those maps. We've hence gone through and added additional features, made modifications to those original proposals based on that community feedback. On the next slide, we also presented, the second part of the plan is to present those regional connections between all of the communities within the county as part of that transportation corridor project. With that, we also received lots of feedback from the community as well on the proposed trails. We got a lot of good information from the people that are riding out there today on those county roads, understanding the destinations they're trying to get to or the places that they avoid because of the characteristics of the traffic. So we've made modifications to that plan and taken the input from the community, those levels, in terms of their goals and objectives into that prioritization process that we move forward with. Next slide. So with that community interest in mind, we came up with a draft prioritization process for the network criteria to be able to evaluate the 40 or so trails that crisscross through the Yolo County. So with that on the next slide, we went through and identified 10 factors initially, but we're down to 9 at this point around 2 specific areas. We heard that safety was the #1 priority for these projects moving forward. The lack of safe walking and biking facilities between these communities, as there are members that are trying to walk on the shoulders and edges of our existing county roads to get from place to place, and really focusing on that. And then the second was access, trying to provide access to parts of our county and our communities that don't have access to basic services, schools, parks, grocery stores, and the amenities that we'll see in some of our cities around the county. And so we came up with 9 criteria that looked at a combination of safety, which included looking at parallel roadways for these trails themselves. So bike trails are very safe in terms of not having any interactions with cars except for maybe at the crossings. But what we tried to evaluate is where these trail alignments were being proposed, what would be the alternative roadway route that they would have to take, and evaluating the speed and collision history along those corridors to be able to evaluate the benefit of the trail adjacent to it or within the vicinity. The second 7 criteria, the second 7 criteria looked at combinations around demographics, the locations of services, schools, parks, libraries, grocery stores, social services within the communities. And we tried to favor trails that connected underserved community that didn't have a lot of support services to one of the cities that had those support services. So you'll see a lot of the characteristics for the higher scoring trails having those direct connections. And then finally, we did look at some of the disadvantaged community indicators that would be used for some of the scoring criteria around our grants as well. And some of the unique housing characteristics on some of the rural isolated affordable housing within the county at some of the special destinations in terms of prioritizing access. The next slide. We presented the 10 criteria to the technical advisory committee about a month ago. And there were representatives from the local cities and the county and Caltrans that helped vet the methodology that we're using, as well as the data we're using within each of the categories. And we took their recommendations and made some modifications to our process, including additional speed and roadway characteristics data that wasn't readily available, as well as some of the destination data that wasn't available in some of the data sets that we used. They helped us find additional schools, such as some charter and private schools that didn't show up in readily available maps, and helped us really identify some of the social services that aren't readily mapped as well. They also really uplifted the idea of prioritizing those trails that created those connections between the rural communities and the neighboring cities to be able to provide access to destinations. So we changed our scoring around a little bit to accommodate that. We expanded the definition of our recreational areas to include some of the corridors themselves. So some of the trails that we identified followed existing creek corridors like Cache Creek and Poudre Creek. And we gave them extra points in this scoring process just for their location as being a destination in and of themselves. So people would be traveling to there just to recreate in those areas. And we thought that was important as compared to maybe some of the parallel trails that followed the state highway or one of the busier county roads. And then finally, Caltrans, we had some discussions on which equity index to use in terms of the changes at the federal level and some local changes around funding for that. And Caltrans helped us with the equity quality index, or EQI, which I think will be more in line with the local funding these trails will be available for in the near term. And then in futures updates of these corridor applications especially, we'll see how equity is being discussed at a federal level when going after those larger grants at that level as well. And then finally, on last slide, we did go through and evaluate the 40 trails that were identified through the community engagement process. A few of the trends that we came up with, or things that we saw, was that the really, again, low populated areas connected to high population areas scored better. And it really tended to connect people to services that are only accessible by automobile currently. Many of those priority corridors followed state highways or busier county roads that had a history of fatalities with people walking and biking. So again, helps score them better as well. And then as a note, some of the trails that are in the periphery of the county will become more important as segments are being built to be able to extend communities together. So you'll see a daisy chaining of these trails as that moves forward as well.
All right, so that brings us to our actual recommendations for the committee. One point that I would like to make is that we have had to kind of reduce this presentation a little bit just because we knew this this agenda was going to be pretty packed, and so we haven't provided you with as much of an overview on like the phase 2 outreach that we did and all the community input that we received. But rest assured that we did receive a lot, and what we're proposing to you is reflective of that input that we received from those 2 phases of outreach. So Adrian gave you the the foundation of sort of how the projects sort of scored in accordance with our evaluation criteria. Those got translated into color-coded lines on the map. And so now we're at a point where, because this project was funded for both planning, for planning purposes and for design purposes, we're at this sort of split in the project where we knew we were going to want to split off a capital project from the planning process, because at this point we knew we would have projects that we felt like were front runners. And then that allows us to start sooner a capital project while we're continuing and finishing up sort of the policies and the goals and objectives of the planning document itself. So the first recommendation that we have is the segment between Madison and Esparto, and you can kind of see in the insets a little bit. So this would be roughly from the I-505 interchange on State Highway 16 and connecting up to Esparto at, I believe, County Road 87, if I'm numbering those correctly. And so that was a really important connectivity in terms of the Madison community really is tied in many ways culturally, economically to the town of Esparto. And they have no way of getting to Esparto other than driving. It's a high speed, high volume state highway. And so it became clear in our outreach to both Madison and Esparto that that was an important connection. Same thing with Davis and Woodland, although it wasn't a red line on the map. This was one that clearly has a lot of need and also, a lot of potential demand for travel as well. So overall, these two recommendations are based on how they performed against the evaluation criteria, input that we received from communities and also the TAC. But we also had to cross-reference this with what our available remaining budget is, because when the budget was established for this project, that was back in 2021. And those who conceived of this project prior to our arrival didn't really know what they would be trying to design for because they hadn't gone through the planning process yet. So they had to make some broad-based assumptions, and now we've had to sort of squeeze in our recommendations into what we feel like we can afford to do in the next phase. Next slide, please. There are also a couple of projects that we are kind of what we're calling grandfathering into the YOTC project because they would have been segments that we would have proposed in this plan, but they're already advancing on their own. The city of Winters is working with Yolo County on connection between the El Rio Via affordable housing complex to the city of Winters, and City of West Sacramento is leading a project to connect the current terminus of the Clarksburg branch line trail down to the town of Clarksburg. So what that does for us is it conveniently has us with projects that really sort of span the full breadth of supervisor districts. We've got projects that would be advancing in each district and also connecting all of our major population centers as well. So we didn't plan it this way, it just happened to come out nicely for us in that respect. And then finally, from a process standpoint, this is really sort of the first formal input that we're getting from one of the public sector bodies. So because Yolo County is going to need to be a close partner with us, since most of these are in the unincorporated county, we're going to want to go to their technical advisory committee and their board of supervisors to get their sort of blessing or approval of the two segments that we collect that we've recommended. Our board will do the same thing with our board next month, but the recommendation for them will be sort of contingent on the Yolo County Board's support for those as well. We think that we'll be able to complete this the planning document by fall of this year, and then we'll be looking late 2026 for completion of the trail design that hopefully you'll be supporting tonight. And so here we move on to the next slide. So these are the two actions that we're asking from you, and that's the conclusion of our formal presentation. Happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you very much. Before you open up for public comment, do any of the members just have initial clarifying questions? I'd like to do the discussion after we take public comment. Oh,
Just curious about how is this project, the planning project funded?
So back in 2021, we received a $1.2 million grant from the federal RAID program. So it was a substantial amount of funding that we received. I think it's called Reinvesting in American Infrastructure Sustainably and Equitably. And that's the name of the program. And our predecessors that applied for that, and we inherited the project and are pushing it forward.
Good project.
Other clarifying questions? Andy and then Molly?
This one would be, how would, so how, like, how are the, I mean, given like the pairs, like, how, what, could you elaborate a bit more, like the methodology that went in, like choosing the specific routes, like, for example, like why the Davis to Woodland route would be like 102 and.
If we could hold that to after comment, because that's gonna be longer.
Okay, I was just writing an example, like like just why why one route was chosen over another for going between the pairs.
I'll start, and if Adrian wants to add his thoughts, he's welcome to. So we knew that connection between Davis and Woodland was gonna be a challenging one because the two communities are kind of skewed offset from each other, and so, you know, starting in one location and you might end up on more of the edge of town than the other. We tried to really sort of split that. And so we sort of landed on the alignment that we did, just sort of based on practical feasibility as well. Trying to stay, because we want to get some early successes if we can. We want to get money for construction. And while there might be more convenient or more, enjoyable routes, say along the railroad right of way, we just don't see that as being particularly feasible. And, at this time and with the funding that we have, we really want to get started on something. And we've been having conversations with, Yolo County, and they're gonna be working on a project on County Road 29 to widen that road. I'm sorry, keep saying that, County Road 27. And they're gonna, so they're gonna be widening that road for wider shoulders. And we said, well, we're not as interested in the shoulders, we're not really interested in the class 2, but is there a way that we could, class 2 meaning an on-street bike lane? Do you think there's a possibility that we could sort of like collaborate on that project to work on this one? And, they're very open to that. So it's really also trying to leverage the opportunities that we have and not just try to, force, projects that just don't want to be compatible with the process and the time that we have to do it. You have anything on
Yeah,
that?
and I'll just say on the map itself, after the prioritization process, there are a number of parallel routes that serve the same purpose in communities. We've decided to leave them on the map as options for the future in case you start moving down the road with a particular trail and run into a right-of-way acquisition issue or a technically feasible issue. You have alternatives that you can then pursue versus trying to limit it to just this one alignment.
One more point to add is that with respect to that specific alignment, we are trying to also leverage potential future development, right? So if you've got the Covell Farms project, if that is approved, we're assuming that they're going to develop part of that trail as their frontage, right? So then that reduces our, we pick up where that, where that development would end. And so that reduces our, engineering cost or reduces construction costs. So that also, that factored into it as well.
Molly?
Okay, I'm still not sure like what we're supposed to ask right now.
I'm just looking for basic understanding questions, because I'm gonna open comment and close and then come back and discuss.
Okay, I'll wait.
All right. So with that, then we're gonna ask if there are many members of the public who would like to speak on this item, and we'll start with anybody online. Do we have anybody?
No public comment on that.
All right, anyone in the audience who'd like to make public comment? Seeing none, we'll close it and we will start with Molly and work our way back.
Okay, sure. First, I want to say thank you so much for bringing this to us before going to the board. We love that. And I'm just thrilled to see that Woodland Davis is on here, that I got the points it needed to make the cut. So that's great. Because I know what you heard and what I see in the summaries, we know that's a priority for I'll just say, I just want to clarify, so the Harry Lorenzo Avenue segment, that's also going to be off streets. Is all of it going to be off street?
Yeah, that's the intent, because I forgot to mention this to Andy's question, which is the other, the other end of the project will leverage the City of Woodland Technology and Research Park, right? And so we know in their plans, they've got a bike trail that's planned. I can't remember the names of all the streets there, but just you know, along the existing Harry Lorenzo Avenue frontage road, Harry Lorenzo doesn't connect all the way to County Road 25 yet. It doesn't need to because we're assuming that that the business park will be constructing the trail along their frontage, right? And then we would continue it down Harry Lorenzo Avenue down to County Road 27.
Okay, yeah, and so then on 27. You're indicating there's gonna be some improvements because that road can get pretty rough and flooded.
Yeah, that's what I was just referencing, was that's a road that the county is planning on widening and of course resurfacing, so if we can time it right, then we can do perhaps the, you know, the civil engineering for our trail, and they could potentially be combined as a single construction project.
Okay.
So I have like, it's gonna be a loaded kind of comment section for myself. Will consideration be placed during the design phase and planning process, to share the right of way with, the actual roads themselves? Cause maybe sometime between 5 or 10 years ago, I spoke with Yolo County Public Works regarding the maintenance of, the bike path between Russell and Winters, and they said they cannot use road maintenance funds for off-path maintenance or off-road if it's not physically connected to the road. That's something that will be considered for these off-path connections that are gonna be proposed in the future, as well as the ones that are upcoming.
Yeah, it's a really good question. It's something that they are, you know, working with the city of West Sacramento with on Parksburg Branch Line Trail project, as well as we don't want to saddle the county with the maintenance costs of these projects. There's a couple ways you can sort of work your way around that. One is to use more durable materials. So like if you use concrete instead of asphalt, you're really pushing out, you know, how frequently you need to be doing maintenance on the facility. But ultimately, what we'll need to do is you know, come away with some sort of maintenance agreement with them that doesn't leave them with all of the costs. And so, you know, we're not there yet because we don't know if we have a project yet. And we won't know until, you know, we have a construction, until we have construction funding, whether or not we'll need to get into that type of agreement with them.
Okay, and then possibly 2 additional comments then. So when I was looking at the map for the Davis to Woodland connection specifically, following the Harry Lorenzo recommendation down to County Road 27. So that's about 7,800 feet of virgin pavement in that case. Would it be possible to also consider the addition or expansion of 102 between 27 and County Road 25A instead, since 25A already has a frontage path connecting from 102 all the way to where the research park is going to be built?
Yeah. That's one else.
Are you talking about the south border of County Road 25A?
Yeah, so the southern limits of
Where the fields are?
yes.
Yeah.
I can't commit to that, but we could definitely look at it.
Kind of just thinking of. Yes, it's nice to take advantage of the new shoulder construction of County Road 27, but we already have that. We're in essence shifting pavement that needs to be constructed from 25 to something that's already constructed at 24, and then just adding construction, the north-south construction to 102 versus Harry Lorenzo. And then
Oh, so you're saying recommend, rather than turning at 29, sorry, 27, continuing to 20, continuing the path to 25?
yes, because there is a
25A.
signalized crosswalk there.
Actually, you know, that's a good point. We didn't consider that. Although there's lots of, part of this, what we're gonna be doing is looking at some slightly different alternatives to see, you know, what does make the most sense, and if there's any, you know, like issues of feasibility that we run into that we weren't expecting. So yes, that's something I think that we can look at. The path on the north, yeah, so if we do a path on the south side, then we can do something that's a little bit more dedicated to sort of transportation cyclists and not to sort of walkers and you know, casual neighborhood bicyclists that you see on the north side of 25A.
Oh, so you're suggesting the possibility of kind of a pass on each side of 25A.
Potentially. I mean, I think that Cause you have to. Won't get into details, but I think that that might be worth looking at if there's funding to do it, if there isn't, engineering funding, or we think it's, not cost effective to include in this phase, then you're right, there is an existing path on the north side that could be used, and there's also fairly comfortable bike lanes on 25A themselves.
Okay, and then an additional kind of tag along to what you mentioned about how Yolo County is gonna be performing construction on 27. So there is funding already in place for construction and expansion of the shoulder on 102 from the city of Davis limits 1 mile north. Is that, we're kind of too late for that process, I'm guessing?
Yeah, I think that one's pretty much designed. So we sort of missed the window to try to combine those two, and I don't think we can catch up to that part, even though I know the county is not intending to start construction until next summer. It was originally scheduled for this summer. I mean, we'll see how far we can get, and we'll ask them about it, but I wouldn't, get my hopes up too high. Cause we also don't have funding for construction.
Okay.
And we know that there's a lot of drainage issues in that area. So, it could be a more complicated design in that like half-mile segment or 1 mile segment than it is for other segments.
That's all.
Thank you. No, just one thing, so yeah, these, first of all, definitely great, great work on this. I mean, I think both of these definitely are places where I have biked, and places where these paths I think will lead to, I mean, there'd be a huge benefit in both of these projects. I think, especially with that Madison to Esparta stretch, biking, there are shoulders on Highway 16, but that is a very fast road, so that's definitely a perfect spot for an off-street lane. So that's the type of distance too, where, it'll be used for a lot of different purposes, everything from like more regional rides to like just kids getting to school or whatnot, so it'll be great for a lot of purposes, so excited to see that moving forward. One question about the Madison to Esparta segment specifically, since that is a state highway, and you alluded to some coordination with Caltrans on this today, and I'm curious just what if you have, just if you go into a bit more detail about where District 3 is at on this, and if you anticipate potential challenges with the encroachment permitting or anything like that.
Yes, good question. We did allude to it in the staff report. We had a really extensive conversation with Caltrans, in part because, to their credit, they let us know about a road rehabilitation project that they were gonna be working on between, on the same segment. But what road rehab means in Caltrans parlance also sort of means like road redesign as well. It's, for them, it's both, right? Whereas like maybe for local agencies, road rehab really is just, road rehab. So, we scheduled a meeting with them and said, hey, are there opportunities for collaboration here? We've got this plan. You guys are frequently needing to add multimodal components to your project. People are expecting that from you. We have this plan that's in development and it is nearly complete. This is an important segment to us. What do you think? And to their credit, they were very open to doing that with us. So we're looking forward to that potential collaboration. They sense, because there's so much road rehab needs within Caltrans's District 3, oftentimes their priorities shift, and it looks like, hopefully coincidentally, shifted from that segment over to the segment between 505 and Woodland, which is still a good, we'd still like to work with them on that project too, or get them to cover the design and engineering costs for that segment, and we would continue to work on the segment between 505 and Esparto. So, we might end up in a better place than we would have if they hadn't shifted their priorities. So a lot of conversation to come, but at least they were very open to working with us. No commitments, but it's always good to get started on the right foot with them and for them to be open to the things that we're proposing, rather than for them to be defensive and say, no, this is our project, this is all we can do. No, they're interested in working with us, and hopefully it comes to fruition.
That's great news, thank you. And then another question, just more generally on the planning process, is just looking at how were places that just looking at this, I noticed that the segment 128 west of I think once you get west of Pleasance Valley Road, didn't look like it was included in the analysis. It just had me thinking how are for places that maybe just beyond the county line that could be, like, that could boost the analysis, like say like that'd be a corridor where we have like Stebbins, like the trailhead that is just across the border in Solano County, and then of course Lake Berryessa a little further west. So I'd be curious like how, if those types of destinations that might be just beyond the county line, but still of course are places people would go to and from the county. Like how those were looked at, as well as like possibilities for how that might be incorporated as this proceeds further.
I'll take it first and then I'll let Adrian add his remarks as well. So remember the priority for this project is to be a functional transportation network, right? So we're trying to connect communities. Recreation, we know is gonna be, probably a regular use of these facilities once they're constructed, but that isn't our highest priority for the purposes of the project. But we have been thinking, particularly on the south side of the geography of the project, trying to connect UC Davis with like Dixon, because we know that there's probably demand there as well. So I'm not sure if that segment was included, but I think we concluded it up to at least the county line, if not farther, but like, that's a functional connection that crosses political boundaries, right? Whereas, something like going west of Pleasants Valley Road, west of Winters, wouldn't be a priority, but that doesn't mean we couldn't include it as a much lower priority segment.
And I'll say, just in terms of sort of the function of the document and who has to approve it, it's going, YTD board and Yolo County will be the approvers of it, of what's in their jurisdiction. There's not budget or scope to take that to Solano County also and sort of create the project out. So I think what we'll do is identify the corridors within Yolo County and then make subjective recommendations to expand those to Dixon or other places. But they wouldn't be part of the prioritized corridors. They get approved by your bodies.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the report out and love how much outreach and effort went into this. And I was just curious, I think the main question I had was looking at his projects. I noticed that there's one in West Sacramento. There's like several I think that look red. One of them being Riverside Parkway between Locks and 15th Street. And just like anecdotally, I would think like the residents of West Sacramento would place that at a much higher value than the Clarksburg Trail, which I think there's like a much more like utilitarian use to like connecting West Sacramento to the River District, but then going to connect it to downtown. And I know that, there's probably other funding and efforts going on with the Clarksburg Trail and stuff, but I'm just curious, like, I'm also not refuting what your outreach told you, but I am curious, like, if those other red line, like high priority projects are going to get into the queue, or like where something like as useful as like that segment where there's incredible infrastructure just south of it and then just north of it. And it could lead to like this like really like great connectivity, like how it can like land on the planning docket.
I'll say part. Yeah, I think part of it, in reality, when looking at the projects to move forward in the recommendation today, really came down to the size of the projects. We had to find bite-sized pieces that fit within the scope of the overall grant. I think some of these other quarters that are identified in here as high priority projects are much longer and could be as impactful or more impactful than those and should be pursued after this first round goes forward. So I think there's some conversation that can be had after that. I think they're out of the scope of what we were looking at for the next set of recommendations.
I guess I've got a question for Brian and also for Andy, which is I know that the two of you quite often bike here for these meetings, and so I'm curious about how you get here, and behind my question is my observation that there's not much opportunity to ride in a protected lane at all, as far as I'm aware. We lived in Spring Lake for a short time, and so I would ride the bike in from Spring Lake to Davis to check on a remodel, and a little bit scary, And, you know, cars are hitting each other on that road. Their head-ons have happened there. Not so many lately, but that's occurred. And people with cell phones and all that, it's high-speed traffic. Mostly at least 60 miles an hour. And so, first of all, I'd like to hear how you get here at all and stay off heavily trafficked roads.
I use the heavily trafficked roads, and that's why we're doing this project. I'm willing to do it, others are not. I recognize that I'm not the target population for this project. And so that's why we think that there's a lot of demand, there's a lot of need. So.
Yeah, I agree.
that's what we're proposing.
I agree.
Well, and just to reiterate, I know I'm not in this conversation very much, but Frank also rides this like almost every day. And I think pretty much everybody who rides this regularly rides 102. And I can say I don't ride it as much as these fellows do, but I have found it to be the safest corridor too, just because the shoulders are so wide. But this project is talking about fully separated bike paths, which means that even if it's next to a busy road, it's protected, right? And I think that's what, if we were just talking about adding bike lanes, you know, on some of these roads, I think it'd be a different conversation, but the scope of this grant is very specifically class 3, which is, I think, sorry, one, sorry, I always get that backwards, which I think makes that powerful. 1, 2, 3.
So, Andy, how do you get here?
I mean, normally, like, actually, I have done 102, I do have, I mean, that definitely is like probably my least, it's probably the fastest route, but it's also like the least preferred, because it is a high-speed road, my preferred ones, I mean, the one that probably be more similar to this would be I go over to road 103. I take that up, between like 28 and 25, and then use 25 to get over to Spring Lake, and I'll say that new bridge they built over 113 near Spring Lake has helped with that. And the other route I'll use sometimes is 90 is like going up, I think it's John Jones Road to 29 to 99, which has class 2 lanes, and still is a bit dicey, but I'd say that 99 is not as fast as, or the traffic is not quite as fast as 102, so that's why
It's not quite as impacted either.
it's still not.
So not really an easy way to get.
Yeah, I'd say there's no ideal, there's
Or
definitely no
safe way.
ideal way, I mean, this will be a huge improvement.
So you go well out of your way just to
Yeah.
avoid the busy.
Yeah, and it would be far safer and way more direct too than what I do now.
So it's really needed, and with when we were living in Spring Lake, which was 7-8 years ago, good number of families were from Davis. And they just moved to Davis because they could either get a bigger house for less money, or they could, it was, a change, whatever, and getting into a new place. And there wasn't much growth going on in Davis. So I think, that for that population, this all makes a lot of sense. And I wouldn't back away from the fact that some of this traffic is recreational. Caltrans, I know, provides roads to recreational facilities. All over the state, it's part of their program. And I wouldn't be ashamed of it, of pushing that. Now, with this current federal administration, who knows how fast this can happen, but it makes sense to get it on the books, because things, I believe, will change. And when they do, and you've got a plan, then you can apply for money. And that's how it happens. So keep going, guys. I think it's great.
And Lulu, do you have any questions?
Oh, I see, but yeah, I do have a question. So is there any difference between a back lane and a back trail? Does the newly, like the proposed back trail, will there be any like physical barrier of some sort to physically separate bikers and drivers?
Yeah, with trails we're referring to as called as a class 1 bike path that is physically separated from the road. A bike lane is typically what's called a class 2, and that means that you're separated from moving traffic with a stripe on the road and you're basically riding on the shoulder.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that. Oh, I have another question. I
Yeah, to
know
the-
that.
To the chair, please.
Oh,
Yes, go ahead.
oh. So, I know that, the agency is called Yolo Transportation District. But, Yolo bus also goes to the city of Sacramento. Is there anything being discussed to add a route between UC Davis and Arden Fairmont?
For bus service or for bicycling?
Oh, bus.
If we could, if you could hold that for, your commissioner comments, that would be great. Let's take up this item. Is that the end of your questions on this item? Yeah. Thank you very much. So I would say that, I think the Esparto Madison is a long time coming, especially since the majority of folks living in Esparto, actually are farm workers, and many of them are seasonal farm workers, and they really depend on both Esparto and Woodland for their support, and they're very isolated. So I do think that is excellent, for both communities. And 102, yeah, 102 is a thing, and I'm out there all the time. And so I think that's good. I do have a question about 102. I know that the little buses sometimes use that, so when you're building these class ones, will there be any potential, like, sort of amenity upgrade that would accommodate buses, or just not see any overlap of uses?
Can you give an example? I might be able to better visualize your question.
You're gonna have a sort of dedicated, separated bike one lane, but you may have a route stop there, if not now, in the future. And will there be advanced planning to accommodate that?
We have used 102 in the past, for the Spring Lake Express, which was a route that was discontinued. One of the items that of course is on the agenda tonight is the short range transit plan, and I think that's one of the possibilities that we'll be exploring, is whether or not it makes sense to bring back bus service on 102. That said, our picture buses rarely stop along the county roads, mostly because there's not destinations. And there's not safe walking and biking routes. There's not good places for the buses to pull over. So that route, while it did serve the 102 corridor, it only stopped in Woodland and Davis, and provided connections between the kind of eastern part of both cities. So I don't anticipate the Cobell Farms development, and the other developments that are, like the Tech Park and Spring Lake, for example, those will kind of bake in some transit stops that we would potentially utilize if Cobell Farms was proposing, for example, to have transit stops on the frontage of 102. I think right now they're only proposing them on Cobell. But in that case, we would stop there, but otherwise, I think for the segments that we're looking at, it seems unlikely that we would have bus stops, just given the rural nature of the uses there.
Thank you. I think that is most of my questions. You're looking for us to affirm. Did you also get enough feedback from us, especially on the Road 25A option? Do you need something more?
No, I think that we got really good feedback and appreciate it.
And are you looking for a motion?
Yes.
Is there someone who would like to make a motion on this item?
I'll motion the staff recommendation that to affirm the Madison to Esparto and Davis to Woodland segments.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there additional discussion? It's seeing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries.
Great. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. This will take us to item 5. The final response to Flint and Hope on the grand jury report and provide feedback on staff recommendations to expand the Woodland Beeline service area. Madam Director, who's going to be presenting?
Well, while we're having a shift change here, I'll introduce YoloTD, our senior planner, who is going to be presenting on this item.
While you're doing that, I would just take Veronica's chair to say I appreciated the public output on the last item. What was surprising to me though was the difference of response. We had done a similar outreach on needs in rural communities just a few years ago and got very different responses. So it's interesting to know whether it's a function of who self-selects to attend. But interesting. Okay.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. As Autumn mentioned, I'm Mola Torney, a Senior Transportation Manager at YoloTD. So this evening, we are asking for the CAC's approval for recommendation for the board to approve the beeline expansion into the unserved area of Woodland, the northeast segment of the city, with the existing beeline budget for the Woodland service area. And we intend to return to the CAC and the board with updates next spring. So as you may remember, June of last year, the Yolo County Civil Grand Jury published a report entitled "Addressing the Issue of Homelessness in Yolo County." We won't be left behind, excuse me. There was one finding that directly impacted YoloTD, and it had to do with the specifically the 4th and Hope East Beamer campus. Next slide. Just to provide the actual finding for you, I don't want to read this whole thing out. But basically on the next slide, recommends that the city of Woodland and YoloTD work together to restore service, bus service in northeast industrial area of Woodland. And so we responded, Autumn responded with approval of the CAC and the board last fall with 3 options to evaluate: to expand fixed route service, to expand beeline service into that northeast Woodland area, and to expand the privately operated van program currently offered by the 4th and Hope East Beamer campus staff. So a bit of background, if you're not familiar with it, the East Beamer campus is an overnight shelter that also offers permanent supportive housing. They have a community center on site, and I believe it was supposed to open last month, but we haven't received confirmation. They're still waiting on permits and things to open a residential addiction treatment program with around 225 current residents. It is located in Northeast Woodland on Road 102 at East Beamer Way. It's East Beamer Street for whatever reason. People who've lived here a long time call it East Beamer Way, so that's why that's in quotations if you're wondering. The current location is 1.5 miles to the nearest bus stop, and it is currently outside the existing beeline service area. If you've ever been out there, there are no sidewalks right outside the East Beamer campus. It has a very narrow shoulder. And the site is actually not built to accommodate a fixed route 40-foot bus. So with that kind of narrows down one of the options that we presented in our response to the grand jury report. And so the feasible options for analysis is to expand beeline service to cover all of Woodland using the existing resources. So right now we have 4 vehicles that serve Woodland with our beeline. To expand beeline service to cover all of Woodland and to increase resources to maintain the existing performance. We've been told by RideCo, which is the organization that that manages our beeline service for us, that would require expanding to 6 vehicles, so needing 2 additional vehicles, or to analyze launching a new van or shuttle program. So the East Beamer campus currently offers a shuttle program through a traditional van. It is not ADA compliant, the van itself. And so any new program that we would work with 4th and Hope on would need to be ADA compliant because it would be funded through public dollars, and would have to also be open to the public. So it couldn't solely serve the East Beamer campus itself. And so there would have to be questions about, how do we market this? What are fares like? Those types of things. So with all of the analysis, which you can find in your staff report and packet, we have broken it down to the TLDR. Too long didn't read. These are our cost per options. So, in order to expand Beeline with performance degradation or to maintain the existing four vehicles would cost $0. We would merely just instruct RideCo to expand the map, and the service area map and, be able to launch pretty quickly. If we were to expand Beeline service and increase the number of vehicles, that would, for year one, cost around $590,000. And if we were to expand the van program, we anticipate it'll cost around $331,000. But that would require additional administrative effort. Like I mentioned, more marketing, we'd have to figure out fares and the back end conversations we would have to have with you and the board would mean that service would not be able to be launched for quite some time, likely over a year. So therefore, our staff recommendation is to expand Beeline service into the unserved area of Woodland with the existing Beeline budget. And next slide. That is shown here in purple. And it does have a high number of current jobs in the area, is expected to grow in terms of jobs. And if you look in the staff report, there's 4 people who live in that area and that's not expected to change according to SACOG. But the number of jobs in that area is expected to grow in the industrial area of Woodland. We've also identified through this effort, 3 new bus stops that can be served by Beeline in this new area. That is at the Public Works Department on Pioneer, the 4th and Hope East Beamer campus, and the Target Distribution Center also on Beamer, but on the other side of 102. And I put the Yolo Food Bank in parentheses here because it is not within the purple area shown in the previous slide. It is within the current area being served by Beeline, but it is not currently identified as a stop. And so our board recommended last month that we look into that, and there is an ADA compliant way that our Beeline vehicles could access the site without going onto the private property, and therefore we can add it as one of the stops as part of this expansion for RideCo to take care of in the back end. So with that, again, our staff recommendation is to approve Beeline expansion, and just letting you know, the board did move forward with that last month. And so they have kicked off the 30-day comment period in that time. And so we will go to final board approval next week at our May 2025 meeting. And will likely, if approved, be able to expand service at those locations identified in late June or early July. But we still do intend to come back to the board and to the CAC next spring and let you know how it's going. Give you all an update. So with that, I can take any questions.
Okay, I'm just gonna do public comment first and then we'll launch in. This is now open for public comment. Are there any persons online that would wish to make public comment?
No public comments online.
Is there anyone in the audience that would like to make public comment? Seeing none, we'll close public comment, and I think this time we'll start with Lulu and we'll work our way down. Do you have any questions for this item?
No, thank you.
Olin?
Just so I understand the location, the Beamer, East Beamer campus is located near the burning facility. Or the
Yes,
recycle.
the methane burning facility is in that area, yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, all right, good. Oh, and how would this be paid for? It says that there's no more budget for it, so what's gonna be dropped?
So with this, we're literally just on the back end expanding the service area map. And so it would still be served by the 4 vehicles that are currently within the Beeline budget. And so there would be no additional budget needed, nothing needs to be cut, nothing needs to be added. It's solely
don't
just
see
the areas being served on the map.
You don't see a deterioration of the service to the rest of the community.
Oh, there's potential for that, so that's why it's called service degradation. And it goes into more detail in your packet, but there is potential, yes, for some additional waiting time for customers elsewhere around Woodland or and longer times on the vehicle, depending on how far each vehicle needs to travel. But yes, and that's why we do intend to come back to this body and to the board with updates to see if those are acceptable or something needs to change.
But in the staff's analysis, you believe that this is worth it.
At
There
this
is
time,
some
because there is
degradation of
no,
service,
excuse me, yes,
and that there is a real need out there.
correct, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, because there is no additional budget that has been identified for this, we want to be able to serve that community and the entire northeast segment of the community of Woodland, and see how it goes.
Sure, who's pushing for it?
The grand jury report is the one that identified that something needs to happen to be able to better serve the.
Does somebody have to go to the grand jury or go to the county and say, hey,
So I think that predated Lola's time, but I was interviewed by the grand jury. They brought me in. I had no idea what they were asking me about. Of course, it's always secret and confidential. So I don't know who tipped them off, but I can say that we have received a number of comments from residents at Fourth and Hope, as well as volunteers and others who were active at Fourth and Hope, but who recognized that there was some significant challenges for people to access that facility. And so we had been receiving some of that feedback, and then the grand jury apparently heard about it. And so, yes, I agree with Lola's conclusion that this was something that we were aware of as a concern that was out there in the community, and the grand jury report really kind of elevated it. I think, spurred this action and this analysis.
well, I know the city strongly supported building that facility as a way to deal with homelessness. And what was their reaction to the grand jury's report?
So I think that, I think the city is concerned about the degradation of performance in the existing service area. They've shared some of that. Clearly this area is fairly low density. I think they have concerns, they moved that facility out there in part to try to minimize some of the impacts to downtown where the facility was previously located, or still partially located. So I think they have some concerns, have shared some concerns about what the impacts may be on the downtown of essentially facilitating more movement of people from the Fourth and Hope facilities being moved to the downtown. But that, the Woodland representative on our board, voted in support of moving this forward at the last meeting, so.
Okay, you're reading my mind.
I'm trying to answer your question. Don't give me any more powers than I have. They thank you.
You zeroed in on my issue, which is that they may have, by accepting the grand jury's recommendation and this agency following up on it and helping that deal with the grand jury's concern, they may make the city unhappy. You may make the city unhappy because they've got a homeless problem like many communities do. And so it's a complicated issue.
There was a lot of board discussion at the last meeting about, why a transportation plan was not part of the original development of the site. And questions about how cities in the future going forward, when they're approving development on the periphery of the community, whose responsibility it is to ensure that there's, adequate public transportation to sites like that. So I thought it was a really interesting conversation and useful. But in this case, we can't change what happened in the past, right? We're just trying to make sure we make the best decisions going forward. And so, I think the city of Woodland is on board with this. I don't want to speak for them, but just based on how they voted at the last meeting, and I think they recognize that there's a need to move something forward.
Councilman Stollard and board member Stollard in favor of it.
Councilmember Stollard is no longer on the YoloTD board. It's now Councilmember Myra Vega.
Yeah, I just flipping my page back and forth a lot. I just wanted to make sure that I'm tracking that the proposed Woodland expansion area purple. So what's on this map here?
That's correct.
Okay, and the expansion area was chosen for access to additional career opportunities.
As well as any future developments that allow, that are potentially built with ADA compliance. And so therefore we could serve them better. So the stops that were identified are ADA compliant and therefore our vehicles can stop there. There are many parts of the area in purple that are not ADA compliant and therefore cannot be currently served. But if there are future changes, future developments, then we could, this is sort of future proofing and allowing us to serve them potentially in the future.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for clarifying. This is not a geographic area I know very well, but it sounds much needed and I like the idea of you know, using what's available to us to serve more people. So thank you.
Yeah, I'll go last and thank you.
Thank you. So, just a couple of questions. So one, I noticed in the grand jury finding that it mentioned, the unmet needs process. Has this, and you mentioned you've gotten a number of comments on this over time. Have there been comments on this received as part of the unmet needs process? And if so, how were those adjudicated?
We have received comments on this during that unmet transit needs process. And that, without getting into the Byzantine workings of the unmet transit needs process, you know, SACOG, the way that works is that SACOG staff makes a determination about whether or not a need that is identified by the community qualifies as an unmet transit need based on their definition. That is also reasonable to serve. And what their finding at the time was that because of the van program that is operated by Fourth and Hope, that meant that there was not an unmet transit need.
And would you anticipate that if that were to come back to the process again, like if that were to come through the process again, that there would still be that same finding? Or just in?
You mean if we were to launch this microtransit program or?
I mean, like, I think just, just in general, what do you think that would, just I'm curious, because I think, one thing is if that were to be found as like a full unmet need, then that would then potentially like. I think I know, like, especially if like reasonable to meet, could mean avoiding service degradation that could direct or like require Woodland to spend like the 588,000 of TDA funds to expand the service to serve the facility without affecting existing service.
You raise an interesting question about what unmet transit needs mean within the context of microtransit. I feel like the program was really designed around this route service. If you have a microtransit service and it's highly degraded, does that count as an unmet transit need? I have no idea. I don't know if anyone, I don't know. I just simply don't know. I don't know if there's been unmet transit need. That sounds like a good research question. But based on what I know now, I don't know of any case where a place that is served by microtransit or that would be considered an unmet need. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, that's of course a process I'm interested in, so appreciate the insight on that. But in general, of course, definitely glad to see that there is nevertheless a plan to serve this facility. That definitely is an important need. One thing I'm curious about just operationally is like so of course like the beeline to Knight's Landing would of course pass by that facility too. So I'm just curious if that's been looked at like operationally, if at least like when that Knight's Landing service is running, of having like that stop, that beeline like stop, if that were able to like stop at Fourth and Hope on its regular runs like between Knight's Landing and Woodland, if that would like be more efficient, but still provide the campus just as good of service as having it be Woodland vehicles that serve that.
The Knight's Landing service area is like 3 stops in Knight's Landing and then every stop in Woodland. So it's kind of 6 of one or half a dozen of the other, if that makes sense. So, and also when there are no ride requests in Knight's Landing or Yolo, that vehicle essentially serves as an additional vehicle in the Woodland area. So they're very much kind of interconnected currently as it is. And yeah, given the proximity, I mean, I think our Knight's Landing vehicle literally goes right past that facility on pretty much every trip to Knight's Landing. I can imagine that is frequently, you know, if there's a ride request there, I'll bet if there's a vehicle coming from Knight's Landing, it's gonna stop there. But there's an interesting relationship between those 2 service areas that I think allows the flexibility for what you're talking about.
Perfect, thank you.
Great.
Yes, I just had a few questions regarding the physical nature of these stops themselves. So you did mention they're ADA compliant. So when I was a bus driver, technically you could put like a ramp down, you kneel the bus and then you could find any flat piece of pavement And then you could technically have someone with a wheelchair go like, board the bus. Is that pretty much what the ADA compliance definition is gonna be in this case for these stops, or is it gonna be like a concrete pad?
It is the former, what you mentioned, so be able to ramp, be deployed and then put, let down in an area where someone can maneuver around easily and to access their location.
Okay, and then for these 3 bus stops, are there any potential amenities for those waiting for Beeline? Would it be like a post showing that there's gonna be a stop, or maybe like a something for the grilling woodland summers to provide shade?
Currently, no, our Beeline service, stops don't have the same sort of flagpole, and amenities that our fixed route service does. So, not at this time.
Okay,
Hopefully that they won't be there as long, right, because it, yeah. Anyway, yeah, I don't have any comments, I'm glad to see this.
Well, I'm, as someone who worked on the preliminary development, I know transit was, at the center of the original. And that, there was a sense that the band system would accommodate, but, clearly not. And of course, doesn't meet ADA requirements, and it's a really big issue for that particular population sometimes. So I'm very glad to see us be able to accommodate with a better solution to serve people, and also ongoing regular maintenance and review is very important for safe transit. So I think that's a great. You had said earlier that you'd be scheduling check-ins to sort of see what the degradation service was. Are you thinking that you're doing that quarterly, biannually, annually?
Right now, the annual, if requested by the board and CAC, we can certainly come sooner than that. Quarterly or in 6 months, that.
Since it intertwines potentially with the need to do additional expansion, I am wondering if there's a way to make sure that that gets sort of factored into the budget and outreach components and transit plans so that they can dovetail together.
That makes sense, yeah. So we do that.
Great, thank you. That's all I have. Do you need a?
Yeah, so the board did specifically say they wanted to know what the CAC thought about this, so I think if the CAC has a recommendation for the board, I think that would be well.
Okay, all I'm looking like is one more comment you'd like to make.
Yeah, I'd like to move the staff recommendation with the addition of the comments that the chair made. In a more structured response interim to a year. Prior to a year. Maybe quarterly, is that acceptable?
I would say at least on the first go, you'd like to have a, how did it go the first quarter? As to whether or not that could remain quarterly, I think you can gauge that based on what input you get. I'm very interested in making sure it dovetails with transit planning and budget.
Okay, does that recommendation make sense to you?
So just to
Do you
read,
understand it?
just, yeah, that to move staff's recommendation with an update 1 quarter after service has begun. And then regular updates coinciding with the budget and work planning process, is that right? Okay.
We have a motion, do we have a second?
Second.
Do we have any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Any abstentions? You've got a plan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching.
I also really want to take a minute here while we're gearing up to do item 6 to say I am loving the work that has gone into packets and into analysis over the last year. It is really, really good work.
Well, I hope all the staff who are here tonight are hearing that, because that is really due to their diligence and hard work, so. Thank you.
This takes us to item 6. The super exciting budget. Provide feedback on preliminary budget and work plan for fiscal year 25-26. And just so folks know, Frank has to leave, I believe at 8, so we want to make sure we can get his comments. So we'll be mindful of that when we get to the comment section.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, I'll go ahead and get us started while Chaz is getting situated. So Chaz, for those of you that are Chaz Pedrito, our Director of Finance and Administration. Good evening. And we will go ahead and I'm gonna kick us off, and then I'll hand it off to Chaz. So we can go to the next slide. So it's budget season. So for those of you for whom this is your first budget, we use a fiscal year budget from July 1st to June 30th every year. So we seek to have our budget approved by our board in June. So the fiscal year 25-26 budget, this is just to give you a high level overview of what's changed from last year. It maintains current transit service levels, including the recently restored express bus service in Davis and the expansion of B-line service in Winters in Knights Landing Yolo that just launched this month. Now, if the board does also approve the B-line expansion to Fourth and Hope and Woodland, that of course will also be included because there's no cost associated with that. So no changes beyond some of the many changes that we've made this year. This year, we also did a comprehensive update of our hours and miles, which is how we pay for our transit service in hours and miles for all of our routes based on our actual spending. And overall, so you'll see some adjustments. Some routes have gone up by 10% or down by 10%. And that's again, really just kind of reflecting. We had been using older spreadsheets and kind of amending and patching them, and we decided to start over from scratch. It was a lot of work, but worth it to make sure we have a solid baseline. So overall, service hours are decreasing by 1% and service miles decreasing by 2%, even though, again, we're not changing anything. No changes to current staffing levels. We do recommend a 3.84% cost of living adjustment. That's pending board approval. And then we have about $7.2 million in new budget appropriations for capital projects. This is things like buying new buses, buying new roll-up doors for our garage, all of the like things that we need. We have a huge, we have a lot of capital assets that need to be maintained and renewed. And we also have a mandate from state of California to transition to a fully zero emission fleet over the course of the next 10 years. So some significant costs associated with that. So fixed route service levels, this slide just reminds all of the service restorations that we implemented this year. And also just a reminder that we do have a service expansion plan for fiscal year 28-29 when the I-80 managed lanes open, and that will be 16 additional trips on the Route 42 AB funded by mitigation dollars and toll revenue. Next slide. So this table just shows you that detail for each of the routes and how many hours and miles and trips this year compared to last year, and there's no change. Next slide. All right, microtransit annual operating budget. So again, we had actually budgeted for a very large, for the expansions that we did, we had actually over budgeted for the expansions. We budgeted conservatively. For Knights Landing and Winters, we didn't actually end up expanding service as much as we could have based on what was in last year's budget, which is why you see a small reduction actually in our microtransit budget this year compared to last. That's really just right sizing it to the actual service expansion that was approved. Next slide. For ADA paratransit, the graph on the right shows you how much our paratransit trips per year grew. In 2020, 2021, 2022, we saw very rapid growth during the pandemic in paratransit ridership. And that has now started to level off, thankfully, because those are very expensive trips. So we actually anticipate a 1% decrease in our paratransit costs compared to the prior year. That's because we had been baking in a cost escalator, assuming that our demand was going to continue to increase as it had been year over year. Now that demand seems to be slowing down, we've taken that cost escalator out of the budget and are assuming that it essentially stays flat. So we'll see how that goes. Next slide. And this will, and I'm going to hand off to Chaz in just a minute, but just a reminder, big picture of how our budget works. We have two major sources of funding that provide for our ongoing transit operations. One is the Transportation Development Act, which is our state funding, and then our federal transportation funds. So the Transportation Development Act, this was a bill passed by the legislature in 1971 to fund transit. It creates two sources of funding. One is state transit assistance, which is funded by a sales tax on diesel fuel and regular fuel. Those funds can only be used for transit operations. The second pot of money is what's called our local transportation funds. These are derived from a 4% sales tax. And those are flexible funds in small counties like ours. If there are not any unmet transit needs, then those funds can be repurposed by the cities for other transportation purposes, such as local streets and roads and active transportation projects. Our federal transportation funds are formula funds at 5307, which is for urbanized areas. We have 3 urbanized areas in our service area: Davis, Woodland, and a portion of the Sacramento urban area. And then we also receive rural formula funds for the rural portions of Yolo County and the town of Winters, which is not considered a UZA, and that's the 5311 program. And those funds require a local match. So in other words, if we want to use federal transit dollars to fund transit operations, we have to have a 1-to-1 match of local dollars. And the State Transportation Development Act money is that local match that we use. So for all of our transit operations, we need to have a mix of those federal and state dollars. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Chaz to get into the numbers for this year.
Thank you, Adam. Good evening. Chas Federico, Director of Finance and Administration. Good to see the new faces here. Sorry, we haven't met yet. So we did have our Technical Advisory Committee meeting earlier today. We had initially planned to go through these brief slides with Autumn teeing it up about, what we're doing in this 25-26 budget year. And as we kind of navigated through these slides, as you heard, we don't have a lot of changes this year. We're not, doing anything significant. We don't have any real concerns on looking at our 5-year outlook that we've updated. So the meeting ended with us not walking through the budget document itself, but that is an option for us if you guys want to still walk through the budget document. So as she was talking about, we focused a lot last year on these TDA funds, the LTF and STA, and how they were allocated and the amount that was being retained by the jurisdictions. So that was kind of a hot topic last year. We're continuing this conversation. So the next few slides is just really going to give us another view of how those TDA funds are being spent by program and how much of our operating budget those funds represent. So this slide here that you're looking at, it's just capturing the new allocations that we'll be using in 25-26 and the changes per jurisdiction. And then this next slide is kind of a two-purpose slide where it is giving you a peek of what our operating budget is as compared to the prior year. And as you can see, there really isn't much of a change there. It's also showing you how much of the ST and LTF is funding that operating budget for both years. And then next slide. This here is just giving you a simplified table per program of how much of the ST and LTF funds each program. So this year for administration, I don't have the comparison with prior year, but the ST and LTF is funding a lot more of our administration budget. And that's because we're utilizing our cash creep mitigation funds to fund the fixed route services. So that's probably the major change that you would see if you're looking at a programmatic level. Next slide, please. And then here it's just capturing again the different types of revenue sources that we're using for our operating budget. This specifically is showing you that we are fully utilizing those one-time COVID relief funds in 24-25. So in this particular table, you're not seeing those funding sources appear as you did last year. And then next slide. So we talked a lot about the jurisdiction and the amounts that they have retained over the past, as far as I can see, couple of years. We were around about 50-50. This year, we had to utilize a little bit more because we saw a significant decrease in STA funding. And the STA funds are dedicated specifically for transit services. And that decrease was almost a 21% decrease. So we were having to utilize a little more of the LTF funds this year, but still staying within, pretty close to what the allocations are for what the jurisdictions retain at 53.8 YoloTD and 46.2 retained by the jurisdictions. And then our 5-year outlook, if you guys have that in your packet, because it's really small to see here. This again, we updated. When we first established the 5-year outlook, this was for the 22-23 budget.
23-24.
Yeah, 23-24, thank you. We first established this for the 23-24 budget. At that time, it was showing that we're expecting a deficit in the year 24-25. Last year, I kept the same model in constant dollars, just to have a good side-by-side comparison. And in last year's 5-year outlook, we didn't see a deficit, not for, for a couple of years down the road. So this year is our most updated. As you can see, my numbers aren't as nice and round, but they do stay flat. We are still using the 2025 constant dollars. I told the technical advisory committee earlier, this is not my favorite approach in doing a forecast, because it really doesn't account for, other factors that you would use in any kind of forecasting. So I hope to update this to right size it a little better and account for the things that are a little more realistic. But this does serve a good purpose. It simplifies, really conveying what our financial position is and not overcomplicating it. It's just showing that as, expenditures, if revenues rise, then, we're seeing a constant balance there. So we're looking okay with the utilization of all the one-time COVID relief funds in 24-25. They are really being offset by SB 125 cycle 1 money, as well as an accumulation of FTA formula funds, the 5307 UZA funds that we haven't been utilizing over the past couple of years because we've had those one-time COVID funds. So we're able to program those funds, in the out years, and that's what you're seeing. And so.
And now it's back to me. Just to wrap up this item on just kind of highlighting some highlights of our work plan for the coming year. The first slide is multi-year projects. So these are things we've been working on that are continuing to be a priority. So a lot of these will probably look familiar. Our short range transit plan that really identifies our, what we'll be talking about that next. For the next 5 to 7 years. We want to be completing that by the end of this year. We are still struggling to find a new transit center in Woodland to replace the County Fair Mall. We've had some setbacks this year, but we're continuing to push forward with that. We're going to be continuing to work on the YoloTD Managed Lanes project and delivering that in partnership with Caltrans and CARTA, the new tolling authority. You just heard about the Yahtzee plan. We're planning to finalize that and complete design work for 1 to 3. Sounds like maybe 2 is probably the magic number, priority segments for this year. Another thing we've been working on is a long-range capital improvement plan. What you see in our budget is really just anticipating needs over the next 2 to 3 years, but we know we have much bigger needs when you look further out around 10 years or so. So we don't have an updated capital improvement plan that's less than 15 years old. So we've been working on an update for that we're going to be sharing with you and our board, as well as advancing our zero emission fleet transition for state mandates. And then in terms of new projects I just want to highlight, we are going to be transitioning to new payment methods and phasing out the Connect card. The Connect card is managed by SAC-RT and it's official, it's going away. If you ride regularly, you've probably noticed that the Connect card readers are often not working. And I think they are kind of at the end of their useful life and there's no plans to replace them. So the Connect card will be going away probably about a year from now. In the meantime, we, with a consortium of transit operators in Sacramento region, are working on transition to tap to pay, so contactless payment readers in coordination with Cal ITP. This is the integrated travel project that is a project organized by the State Transportation Agency to basically get all of California's transit agencies onto a tap to pay system, so that you don't need exact change and you don't need to have a specialized card that works in Sacramento but doesn't work in the Bay Area. The idea is to kind of have it all be uniform statewide. So we're working on that, and there's a lot of details still to be figured out. But we do know that we have a deadline for Connect Card to go away, so we're wanting to make sure that we get those other systems in place before that happens. We're gonna be, a priority that's emerged over the course of last year is educating, engaging, and collaborating on future transit funding shortfalls and potential solutions. So as you see, we do not have a shortfall in the 5-year outlook because we have savings of dollars. Again, we're still benefiting from the COVID recovery funds that are still an SB 125, which is our state transit recovery. So we're in better shape than a lot of the bigger transit operators. But this is something that we have a workshop coming up on May 27th, just to remind everybody, there's a transit funding workshop, a special meeting. We're gonna have guest speakers from the FTA, the State Transportation Agency, UC Davis, Professor Kerry Watkins is gonna be here talking about the future of transit funding. And there's gonna be a series of workshops over the next year to talk more, to educate all of us about transit funding and what the opportunities are and strategies to try to look at filling the gaps. And then the last new project I'll highlight is some very high priority procurements for transit operations, which is like literally our 3/4 of our budget is we pay a private contractor, Transdev, to operate our transit service. That contract dates to 2018. We're gonna be reprocuring that this year, which is a major undertaking and one that has huge implications, obviously, for our service. So we're excited about that, and it's also a big daunting project. We'll also be looking at some other procurements for security technology, routing and scheduling software. We have also a lot of equipment and contracts that are very outdated and don't really reflect kind of our modern smartphone world, if you will, that kind of limit our flexibility, and we're excited to hit refresh on a number of those over the next year. So I think that is the end of our slides for the budget and work plan, and Chaz and I are here to answer your questions. And we're not looking for any action for you on this. This is informational. I will be going to the board as an informational item next week. So if you have specific feedback or comments to share, we will pass those along to the board.
Thank you very much. I'm going to start with public comment, and then I'm gonna give Frank the first cut. So with that, is there anyone online that would like to comment on this item? No public comment. Is there anyone in the audience who'd like to comment on this item? Seeing none, we'll close comment, and Frankie, please make it order.
Thank you. So I just have a quick question. I was looking at the line regarding new service for the YoloTD BMT mitigation plan. I can't recall any of the details too specifically. I think this was a couple months ago when the mitigation plan was discussed. Is that fiscal year 28, 29, kind of like the median estimate for what's estimated to be given by CARTA? Right, am I saying that, stating that correctly? CARTA is will be providing funds?
Yeah, so actually those are funds that are initially the first 3 years are paid for out of construction mitigation dollars. So those are actually funds that we've already won from the California Transportation Commission last year when we got the project fully funded. So those first 3 years, once the project opens is when the mitigation has to take effect. And so we're estimating that the project's gonna open in mid-2028, is that right?
Yeah, I think this, construction schedules can always change and get caught right in the middle. You're making a lot of progress, and then you hit the winter when we have to shut everything down. But it could be potentially, best case scenario could be fall of 27. More realistically, probably mid-28. Either way, the funding that we have to provide the additional service, will offset whatever those costs are, regardless of when that service needs to launch.
Beyond the first 3 years, then it'll be at the discretion of the CARTA board based on the availability of toll revenue to continue funding that service.
Okay, and so these 16 additional trips, I'm guessing that the planning for, I'm assuming additional vehicles would be needed and operators. That's something that's gonna probably be occurring over the next handful of years.
Yeah, that's right. That's part of our 10-year capital improvement plan. And in fact, I think we are applying for some funds this year that would help purchase those vehicles as part of the Affordable Housing Sustainable Communities Grant application with the Yolo Housing Authority for their Yolanda Donnelly project. That includes funding for, I want to say, 10 zero emission buses, which would be amazing. And would definitely get us the buses that we need to fund that expansion.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, Fred?
No.
Okay, let's start with Molly and work our way down.
Okay, so, I just wanna clarify, what we're learning from the new funds coming, is it new funds coming towards YCTD from the unmet needs process? Is that what I'm reading? There was an 8% on the, it was slightly more than last year coming.
Oh, is this on the TDA, the
Yeah,
STA and LTF? Yes,
Yeah.
it was there was a bigger apportionment for the LTF funds, but the STA funds, had about a almost 21% increase.
So, but that's not okay, so those are so who determined that? SACOG did?
So those are allocated by the state based on sales
Oh, I
tax
see,
revenue and
okay.
gas tax revenue, and they're apportioned to each county by population.
I see, so this is just what we're getting, this is not.
That's what we're getting in the door,
in
the county as a
In the
whole.
door, I see,
Yeah.
okay. So that's reflecting just growth in, but it's like it's less than inflation, right? Like, or what, like, it might be helpful to understand this in the context of inflationary pressures on the budget, right? Like, I was looking at the different numbers and thinking, oh, but is that eaten up entirely by inflation or our costs? I don't know.
Yeah, I would say it is because, you're also seeing, a lot of the changes that we had, although it looks, that we end up looking a lot like what we budgeted last year, if not, actually we're a little bit lower. There were other adjustments that we also made just based on what we're seeing, will happen or won't happen any longer. The first year that I was here, there was a lot more plans in different operating programs that we thought would happen, and they didn't happen, and it could be for a number of reasons. We weren't gonna pursue those things anymore, or we, hit a period where we had significant staff turnover, so things just weren't getting done. So I had right-sized our budget, brought it down significantly in some of those areas last year. And then again, this year, there were some other adjustments that I made. So in form, it looks as though, we're tracking on the same, the way that the 5-year outlook looks. But with some of the projections that we made in the way that we're ending 24-25, as well as what we budgeted for 25-26, they do include inflationary factors. It just happened to net out with the other things that we had adjusted. And so with, STA, one of these questions came up in the TAC committee earlier too, about the STA and the decrease there. And so what I was able to talk about a little, and then I went back and did a little more research after that meeting, was that this STA 21% decrease is tied to diesel and fuel sales, and so I did a little research on that, and it looked like there was a steady incline from the year 2021 to 2023, where it really peaked up to like $6.20 from like $3.50. And so that 2023 year was around the time we were preparing for the 23-24 budget. So that's where, we're seeing we had a huge spike in the STA. We went from about 3.1 to 3.8, and then now we're seeing it drop back down pretty significantly. So that one specifically, if you want to kind of understand that one a little more, it is tied to the diesel fuel tax and kind of what those prices are looking like, and even the volume that's being sold. I hope I answered your question. Did I
I
answer?
think so, yeah, so the pie got a little bigger. But then what I'm really like asking about is this retained by jurisdictions.
Right.
More controversial, like that we talked about last year, that you had said was sort of a hot button
Right.
topic, so I'm not really understanding the trend there. Yeah. And why, like, how do you just, like, what is the rationale for that change?
So with the decrease in STA, we have to make up those funds somewhere. And so those funds are, the LTF funds are prioritized for transit. And so to the extent that there is, you know, we would have, if we would have to cut service, then that allows, we have the discretion to take those funds, to make sure that we're able to kind of meet up
I see.
to make our budget, keep
So
our
that's
budget.
what happened here.
So that's what's happened here.
Okay.
That's right.
All right, that's good, thank you.
Mandy?
Thank you. First, piggybacking on the discussion about the jurisdictions retaining funding, I think one thing, just an observation is that that Davis and West Sac, could some of what they're retaining could still be going towards transit, since Davis has Unitrans and West Sac has the Via on-demand service. Well, it's like Woodland, Winters, and Yolo County, Woodland, that's where it'd be more or less all of what's being retained, I presume, would be going towards local streets and roads. But I think I'd be curious to see, like, just, do you have the data on, like, for Davis and West Sac, like, of what they're retaining, like, what's going to transit versus roads? Or could that would just provide good context to
Yeah.
provide maybe a clearer perspective for these jurisdictions? Like, what folks are interested in is what's going to transit versus what's not. Well, if something is going to Unitrans instead of Yolo bus, that could be, that's less of a problem.
Yeah, I think for as far as what the jurisdictions retain in LTF funding, that's something that should be in their TDA audits. We don't have that detail. We can look at their budget and see how they're utilizing those funds, but really, if you want to know the results of any allocation year and how they were used, I would look at their TDA audits.
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you. Yeah, my follow up on that. Then also just one kind of quick observation, potential correction here, just looking at the table on fixed route service hours. I've noticed both like some, just that I noticed like looking at 43 and the 44 that has like the proposed round trips just at the table going down, like it looks like it'll be undoing like some of the service increases, just the numbers here like will be reverting to the past number. Like
I don't,
43 going from like 3 to 1 round trip, and I figure that's not happening, just wanted to flag that to make sure that.
thank you for catching that. If there is an error, we'll definitely take a double, closer look at that.
No, problem. I noticed, yeah, with just some of the like the express routes, and then also like the 215, I noticed like going from like 12 to like 36 round trips, and like similar like the 42 go, so I just noticed like big, and again, that'd be amazing if those increases happen, but I figure that might have been a typo.
That's interesting.
That's based on typos. Thank you for catching that.
Yeah.
It's a lot to kind of pull this thing together, so we appreciate those eagle eyes.
Oh.
One other thing I just wanted to add to Chaz's response, if I may, Madam Chair, on the question of how the jurisdictions spend TDA funds that are not used for transit. At the May 27th Transit Workshop, which I'm hyping, we are gonna have Eric Johnson from SACOG, who will be talking about the unmet transit needs process and also how TDA money is spent here in the broader SACOG region. And so one of the things I have asked him to share is some information about generally the kinds of, the types of projects that that TDA funding is being spent on when it's not being spent on transit here in Yolo County and across the region as a whole. So hopefully he'll be sharing that information at that workshop if folks are able to attend.
So what is the date?
That is Tuesday, May 27th at 6 p.m. And yeah, we can happy to follow up with more details if that's not already in your calendar.
That doesn't.
Could you send it down to each of the members?
Yes, absolutely. We'll make sure each one of you receive the calendar invite.
Thank you, that's it. Stay tuned for that. I'll try to make that, I'll still be around here, so I'll try to make that workshop. Then just one last question on the earlier discussion on the YOLO 80, but on the service expansion that will be funded through the YOLO 80 project. So I noticed that was the service increase on the 42, but as I recall from back when we were looking at the EIR, that the 138, there was also a service increase program for that project. So I'm just curious if that's still on the table too, or if that funding got like repurposed, if it all wound up going to the 42, or if you could clarify where that's at.
Yeah, that funding is still out there. That funding, it flows to SAC-RT, and then we're a subrecipient of SAC-RT for that funding, and it's unclear how many new trips will be funded through that. I think that's all still TBD. So we don't have we don't have the concrete details on that. I don't know if there's any updates, Brian, that you want to share on that.
Now, I do think that the EIR commits us to a certain number of additional trips. So I think those are still in place, but we do need to work with Caltrans and with SAC-RT on what's called the cooperative agreement. To figure out exactly what the split of funding is for SAC-RT and for YoloTD for our operational needs.
Thank you, that's good to know. And just on that same line, if for some reason, like, once that project comes online, if for some reason, like, I mean, it could be a funding issue or maintenance issue or driver shortage issue or something like that, if, like, if you weren't able to provide, like, the number of, trips that, like, that is in the EIR mitigation package, what would happen?
That would be a good question for Caltrans. I don't know. I guess I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, it's sort of speculative at this point, so it's hard to respond to that because we're proceeding, you know, under the intent to comply with the EIR mitigation measures. And we haven't come across the circumstance yet that would, you know, preclude us from being able to do that.
Good news, thank you.
Patrick, Colin, questions?
I have a kind of a global question about the new administration in Washington and how this may affect transit funding. They've stayed away from transportation mostly, except in aviation. But what's your speculation?
If I could read minds, Olin, I would not be trying to read yours, I'd be trying to read his. And I'm hearing all sorts of speculation that there is likely going to be, you know, some kind of cuts in formula transit funding, but I don't want to give those airtime because I don't know that any of them are substantiated.
Fair enough. Then it could change in an instant.
That's right, that's right. So apparently though, we all just need to get married and make more children. Because according to the Secretary Duffy, then those are the areas that are gonna be prioritized for transportation dollars. So get out there and make some babies, y'all. Frank, Molly, good job. Patrick, good job. Lulu?
I've already done my service.
Yeah,
Oh, wait till the end, we'll come back. Okay. Lulu, do you have a question?
Oh, yes. Oh, so regarding the phasing out Connect card, you said it will be like a one tap. So is this new thing going to be an app on smartphones or a card?
I think it'll be both an app for smartphones, and we do currently have an app that you can use to pay, and I don't know if it's gonna continue to be that one. It sounds like it might be a different one. But then it'll also just be a regular debit or credit card. Yeah.
Well,
I apologize, I also have to leave around 8, not exactly 8 on the dot, but I have because of the baby, I
Thank you for your service.
yes, so. Yes, so, yeah, thank you, I can baby that, won't go to bed, my husband.
that happens. But don't worry, then they'll switch and you'll wonder what happened to you.
I know, but now I'm a milk cow or whatever.
So I just had a couple, when you're talking about the app, is that gonna also accommodate things like Google or Apple Pay, or is it just gonna be credit card and proprietary app, or,
I wish I could tell you.
right? Good to know. I also, so because transportation is part of THUD, and I follow the housing a bit, the housing is looking at really steep potential cuts, but transportation, especially in rail at least, is not looking at any cuts. They're actually continuing with their rail car expansion at the president's proposed budget. So, so I'm not sure transit has the same kind of visibility, and it looks like the food fight in the THUD will be over HUD. That being said, for folks in the room, it's a top line from the administration. It becomes a top line for the committees, and then they negotiate how much for each of the programs. So at the end of the day, if it comes down to cutting housing vouchers or cutting transit dollars, that will be the question for that legislative committee. So cutting housing or cutting transit. and we've been in this place before, so folks might remember that under push two. And in that time, the League of Cities Transit, the Council of Mayors and the housing groups all did one single advocacy strategy. So just potential for those times to return, just throw it out there. In this preliminary budget, I'm just gonna talk about what is near and dear to my vice chair's heart. Is there any look between here and in what we're going to be looking at in the short range transit plan coming up to talk about the 42?
I'm sorry. could you
The
restate
bus
question?
between Winters and Dave,
Oh, the 220.
the 220, I always get that one wrong.
Yes, so we do know that that is a high priority for the board as well as the CAC. Right now, this budget assumes none of the SRTP recommendations would take place in this current fiscal year. We're assuming they would take place starting at the beginning of the next fiscal year. I would say if the board has directed us that if there is any kind of near-term implementation that happens prior to the beginning of the next fiscal year, that they would expect the 220 to be part of that, you know, first tier of priority service that's in there.
Thank you very much. I think that's round of questions. Does anybody, and input, does anybody have any last things?
That's great news about the 220.
And you don't need any other motion from us. You feel you've got the information that you were looking for.
Thank you.
Oh, we got one last, Patrick. gets
One
the
last
word.
question. Sorry, thank you. But just on the topic of apps, I just think that it's just worth stating, and maybe if you all could elevate this comment or sentiment, that it's just, I think effective engagement and outreach would see us having like maybe less new apps roll out all the time, which I'm sure is preaching to the choir here, but I'm just thinking about, you know, I know there's a concerted effort to get NorCal Go out. And I don't know if that's the app you're referring to, but it stands to reason it's not, and there'll be other apps going out there, and it's just each new one seems like this might be the one. And I just think that there's like definitely fatigue and confusion, and I'm literally saying this for the record. If we could get that out, you know, and so the powers that be have that feedback, I'd be appreciative.
Appreciate the feedback.
What? No apathy?
So Madam Chair, recognizing that we're gonna be moving on to the short range transit plan, I just wanted to see if you wanted to invite, before we do the presentation, any of our members would have to depart if they wanted to share any comments before they have to go.
I think that would be apropos. So that will be Frank and Molly. Do you have any comments or questions you'd like to get in the hopper before you have to leave on item 7, 8, 7?
Okay, so I read through the initial draft that's been printed out, prior to the last board meeting. Exciting information, it's pretty much precluding to the next version that's gonna be released, later this year. So I'm excited to see what further updates and recommendations are put out there.
I didn't do my homework, so I have to look at the packet, maybe I'll come back with any.
All right, that sounds good. All right, that takes us into item 7 for realsies. And that is the short range transit plan update, existing conditions, community survey, draft goals, objectives, and performance measures. Who's doing the presentation? Lola.
Hey, everyone. Thank you again for having me. Again, Lola Torney, Senior Transportation Planner. We are joined this evening by our consultant team, but I want to tee us up a little bit. So it's been a while since you've heard any updates on the short range transit plan, but I wanted to assure all of you that we are working on it. And so this evening we have a loaded a packet and slides for you that we're going to try to get through quickly, but wanted to update you on the efforts that we've been doing on the existing conditions report. The majority of that was conducted and completed last year, so some of the information in that is going to be out of date, which is expected. And as well as that, we wanted to share the draft goals, objectives, and performance goals performance, yes, you gotcha. Goals and objectives and performance standards for, when we start moving forward with the, draft recommendations for the short range transit plan. So with that, we do have slides, that we've shared with you. These are slightly out of date, and so, Janine is going to be awesome and, let Daniel share his screen, with the updated slides. Daniel, go ahead, please introduce yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Lola. Hi, everyone. Daniel Pena with Transportation Management and Design. I'm the Deputy Project Manager on the Short Range Transit Plan. We also have Anna Jose online. She's taking notes for us. Thanks, Anna. Yeah, and I'm here to discuss the initial findings of the Short Range Transit Plan. So if no one minds, I could share my screen here. 1 second. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes, now we can.
Awesome, great. And yeah, to Lola's point, this data that we're going to be going through today is a snapshot in time of when we drafted this report. So a lot of this data is from 2023, 2024. Which is to say that the budget information that you just got and the findings that you got from the budget is more correct than what we're presenting here, but we are directionally correct. And what matters here is what those findings and the direction they're pointing us in terms of what recommendations we hope to be providing in the short range transit plan. So without much further ado, we'll go forward with the existing conditions and goals and objectives. 1 second here. So on the agenda, we're going to discuss what is the SRTB, then we'll go into the findings of the market assessment, the service evaluation, the community survey, and as Lola mentioned, the draft goals and objectives, and then next steps from here. So first off, what is the SRTP? The SRTP, or Short Range Transit Plan, details how a public transportation system will function over the next several years, usually spanning between 5 and 10. For our purposes, this plan will guide YoloTD in making informed decisions regarding services like Yolo Bus fixed route services, Beeline and ADA paratransit services between now and 2031, which is the ultimate horizon for this project. So now, talking about the market assessment, where we look at demographics in Yolo County, holistic travel patterns, not just transit riders, but other riders, and then you know, the development patterns within Yolo County and how conducive that is for transit use. So I'm sure you're all familiar. So when we're talking about Yolo County, the population is 220,000. The service area population is a little larger than that just because we also account for the services that are provided to downtown Sacramento. Major population centers are Davis, Woodland, West Sacramento. And then, you know, there's lots of rural communities with some of the bigger ones being Winters and Knights Landing. Again, nothing new to you all since you are so involved in your community, but just some context for everyone. So when we talk about transit ridership, we like to pay particular attention to certain key transit riding demographics. These are groups that for some reason or another ride transit at higher rates than the general population. So whenever we conduct an analysis, we really pay attention to these specific groups. And we see in Yolo County, the key demographics that make up ridership. Some of the largest groups are people with disabilities, which make up 20% of the Yolo County population. Youth under 18 is also the second largest key transit riding demographic group, but we also see that there is substantial numbers of college-aged residents and low-income residents as well. So when we talk about these populations, we also are very interested to see how much access these people have to transit services. So we took a look at the percent of the Yolo County population that are within a half mile of transit access. So that's half a mile of a transit stop that's receiving transit service in Yolo County. We see that the majority, over 90% of zero vehicle households do receive transit. So either they made a conscious decision to live next to transit, or YoloTD is able to capture them correctly in their service designing. But we also see that college-aged residents and low-income residents also have high levels of transit access to transit ridership. There, the population group that has the lowest, according to our half-mile buffer that we're looking at here, are persons with disabilities, but it's worth keeping in mind that these people have access to ADA paratransit that they have a higher degree of access to ADA paratransit service because their service areas are larger for those services. And when we look at market demographics, we really want to look at holistic travel trends to really understand how how people are traveling, not just on the bus, but via other modes of transportation, and what role transit can play in serving all manners of trips in Yolo County and to surrounding regions. So these are all trips. This is based on replica data, which uses cell phone data and other data sources to provide a picture of travel patterns, be it by public transportation, automobile, bicycle, etc. So some big trends are that since pre-COVID 2019, actual trip making has increased. So this is using fall 2023 data. Since 2019, weekday trips have increased by 14%. Weekend trips have increased even further by 22%. And then we wanted to have an understanding of the top travel flows within Yolo County and surrounding regions. Top travel flows on an average daily basis are between Sacramento and West Sacramento, which are, downtown Sacramento to West Sacramento is served by YoloTD services. And then intercity trips between Davis and UC Davis is also a very big travel market that's served primarily by Unitrans, but also served by YoloTD services as well, including things like Route 42. And then Davis to Woodland, of which there's around 35,000 trips average daily. Again, these are more holistic trends, so just not transit. One of the big stories that really affects transit demand is this trend we've seen all around the country, which is trips shifting later into the day. We're seeing that there's less. This is Yolo County. We're seeing that there's less trips being made on an average weekday at 7 and 8 a.m. and there's more trips being made at 4 to 5 p.m., which has big ramifications for the types of services that YoloTD provides, and really has an impact on the ridership of transit services since people are making trips later in the day. And it's not only the time of day that's been impacted by COVID. We also, the reasons why people are making trips are changing as well. Not a big surprise, but they're between 2019 pre-COVID and 2023 fall. We see that work and school trips have declined just due to the fact that both of these trip purposes have more alternatives now, with the ability to both learn and to work from home for certain sections of the population. But we also see that other types of trips have increased, though, including shopping and social trips as well. So again, trying to understanding these holistic travel trends and how things have changed will really help shape the kinds of recommendations that are going to be developed as part of this plan. So now going into the service evaluation, again, this was a snapshot in time. A lot of this data is 2024, 2023. That budget information you got is more current, but again, the general trends are the same. So we're looking at YoloBus, YoloBus ADA paratransit, and Beeline services. As you all know, YoloTD, what they offer fixed route service, which is the traditional bus route service, and then two different demand response services, ADA paratransit services, which are mandated by the federal government, and Beeline microtransit service in 4 different zones: Knights Landing, Winters, Woodland, and Yolo. Just for everyone's refreshment, Yolo bus services provided primarily in Woodland and West Sacramento, which both get local service as well. Regional service to Davis, downtown Sacramento, and the airport, and then service to Cache Creek, and also a microtransit service in Winters, Yolo, Knights Landing. So this is an interesting one. This is looking between ridership has declined since 2019. And the amount of service that's being provided is declining as well. We see that ridership between 2019 and 2024 has declined to around 55% of what it was in 2019, and that revenue hours have declined to around 65% of what they were in 2019. But the previous presentation did state that YoloTD is in the process of restoring more and more service. So ridership declines can be tied to decreases in service levels. So it's exciting to hear that more service is being restored, which isn't captured in this graph. And hopefully will have an impact as we go further, as we see the ridership data. So that's a positive trend to look forward to. Again, we looked at different peer agencies. We saw that Yolo County had an above average decline in ridership, and that was also followed by also had a subsequent above average decline in service levels. But again, as YoloTD restores more services, hopefully those ridership declines will reverse along with them. So it's a positive development that we're able to restore more service. When you look at the route level, you really see that ridership is really concentrated in two key routes. There's lots of service here, but over 50% of the ridership on Yolo bus services are concentrated on Route 42, which is the service that connects Woodland, Davis, West Sacramento, downtown Sacramento, and the airport, and Route 215, which provides service from Woodland and Cache Creek. So any recommendations that impact those services are going to have an outsized impact on the overall ridership of YoloTD as well. So that's why funding that's associated with the services that go over the causeway is going to be really beneficial for this SRTP and for the riders of YoloTD services as well. And should note that Route 44 has since been restored since this analysis was done, but we don't have ridership data on it, so it wasn't included in this report. So one of the other key metrics that we use in service evaluations is service efficiency. This is really bang for your buck, which is the number of passengers that you're moving per revenue hour, which is the unit that we use to measure the amount of service that's being provided. On average, the YoloTD fixed route system carries 8.3 passengers per revenue hour. The most productive route is Route 215, which is the service from Woodland to Cache Creek. That service is really dialed in and really tailored to the work shifts of those that work at the Cache Creek Casino, and that carries around 17 passengers per hour. The least productive are routes 211, which is local service in Woodland, Route 40, which is local service in one of the local services in West Sacramento, Route 230, which is service from West Davis to Sacramento. Those routes carry under 5 passengers per hour. And we also looked at passengers per trip as well. And again, Route 215 is the most productive on a per trip basis as well. Ridership by stop, not a big surprise. Key destinations are, Woodland, Davis, downtown Sacramento, and then you see that big dot at the Cache Creek Resort as well, which is a major destination for YoloTD fixed route services. Top boarding locations, again, concentrated in Cache Creek Casino Resort. That's a fairly popular service that's really tailored to the needs and demands of the people that work there. Downtown Sacramento, Y Street and 45th, and then the County Fair Mall Transit Center. So any decisions about where we relocate the transit center are going to have in Woodland are going to have an outsized impact on the ridership experience for a large proportion of the riders of YoloTD services, because it is such a important stop. And then the bus terminals at UC Davis, both Memorial, Union, and Silo, top locations for YoloTD services. So Beeline, in 2024, it carried around 25,000 passengers, around 2,000 passengers per month. Woodland, both by the fact that it's one of the larger population centers in Yolo County, had the most popular Beeline service, but the services in Winter and Knights Landing are both popular as well, with riderships that are more commensurate with just the smaller population size of those communities. One of the things that we really wanted to pay attention to with regards to Beeline is truly trying to understand what the role of Beeline is. How much can it replace fixed route service? How can it supplement fixed route service? How can it play a role in rural services? One of the things that we paid a lot of attention to was, the experience within Woodland. In 2019, there used to be 4 local routes serving Woodland. In 2024, there's only 2 routes, local routes serving Woodland. But since then, Beeline has been introduced. So ridership on local services in Woodland has declined since 2019. But as it stands now, on an average day, the Woodland Beeline microtransit service carries almost as much as the 2 fixed routes that provide service in Woodland. But due to the nature of demand response services, in which trips are really tailored to a particular customer, it's just hard to carry passengers as efficiently as fixed route can. Which is seen on the chart to the right, which is passengers per revenue hour. Woodland Beeline is carrying around a little over 2 passengers per revenue hour. And in 2024, even with lower ridership demand, the 2 routes serving Woodland carried over 6 passengers per revenue hour. Popular destinations for Beeline services. For Woodland Beeline, we're Woodland Community College, Gateway Shopping Center, and Westcourt Plaza. For Winters Beeline, which provides service between Vacaville, Davis, and Winters, popular destinations were the Vacaville Premium Outlets, UC Davis, and University Mall. So, as was mentioned previously, ridership increased pretty significantly on YoloTD ADA paratransit services. The data that was shown in the previous presentation has shown that it has somewhat plateaued. Recently, this data is slightly out of date, but still there was a pretty significant increase in that YoloTD service. ADA paratransit ridership demand. It's worth noting because it's a very resource-intensive service to provide. And to speak to that is when you look at it at a per revenue hour lens, it's carrying around 1.3 passengers per revenue hour. The peer average was 2.4. A lot of that, a big factor in that is the fact that the average trip distance is just pretty large, just due to the large distance between destinations and origins in Yolo County. And again, it is a resource-intensive service to provide. The subsidy for trips is around $80 per trip, and fare box recovery, that's the amount of fare revenue that covers operating expenses, was around 5%. But it's still worth knowing that the YoloTD ADA paratransit service is both mandated by the federal government and that it plays a key role in providing services to those that cannot ride local services, fixed route services, and cannot drive. So when we look at the top 10 destinations in 2024 for YoloTD paratransit services, we see the kinds of locations that are very popular for these services. Special education schools, 20% of trips had either origin or destination to True Connections in Davis. Assisted living facilities, healthcare facilities, employment services, retail destinations that both serve as shopping locations and locations of employment for these people that rely on these services, just show, just the key important destinations that YoloTD paratransit services are able to provide. It's also worth noting that the top 10 destinations were over 50% of the trips. So the ridership is very concentrated in these locations in Yolo County. So key takeaways from the service eval: ridership is recovering, but is still below pre-pandemic levels. Routes 42 and 215 carried a majority of system ridership. Low service frequency and limited spans affect competitiveness, so more service restoration is useful. Commuter service demand has shifted while weekend demand is rising. Beeline productivity is lower than fixed route, but it's playing a key role in serving rural communities and in supplementing local services. And YoloTD paratransit demand is growing significantly, but to the previous presentation, it is starting to slow down. So now the results of the community survey. We conducted a survey as part of this SRTP that was last summer. We received 209 responses, and we surveyed current writers, former writers, and potential writers. One of the key insights that the service provides is this important satisfaction matrix, where we asked survey takers how important a certain aspect of bus service was to them using bus services and how satisfied they were with YoloTD's quality of that particular attribute. That really lets us hone in on which aspects of service we should be improving. So the larger discrepancy between importance and satisfaction, that really highlights what needs to be improved or what's going well. Areas with the largest discrepancies that should be targets for priorities improvements are bus reliability, bus frequency, and when service is available. Things that customers are satisfied with were bus driver friendliness, the ease of paying fares, the availability of seats on the bus, and the cost of riding the service. So the key survey conclusions were we should be improving reliability of services, we should be extending service hours into the evenings. Existing customers preferred frequency over service coverage. We should maintain fixed route service as a primary service model, which isn't to say that we should be improving fixed route at the expense of Beeline, but just to be sure that, that there should be a complementary relationship in some locations for fixed route and Beeline services, and understanding where the leverage is, especially in those rural communities as well, where Beeline can really play a key role. And that we should be enhancing first and last mile connections by improving pedestrian bicycle infrastructure. So the draft goals and objectives, we, with YoloTD staff, developed these initial goals which are our draft goals for the SRTP, which will guide and shape the recommendations that'll come from this SRTP. The first goal is a high quality transit service, as measured by providing an attractive service and providing a reliable service. Improving access. Goal 3 is to make sure that YoloTD is playing a role in improving environmental sustainability. Goal 4 is to provide a seamless regional travel option. And then goal 5 is to ensure that we are efficiently allocating resources. And each of these goals also has associated objectives as to how do we achieve those goals, and then each of those objectives has performance measures associated with them, which will help us measure whether or not we're being successful in achieving those objectives and therefore the goals. The SRTP timeline, we hope to be done by the end of the year, as was mentioned previously. Then the next steps are to use the findings from the existing conditions and propose goals and objectives to develop service recommendations for improvement. We're going to be looking at 4 different scenarios that take into account different future scenarios for how much resources are available to us. And we hope to have the initial draft recommendations for presentation to the board in July, and then to subsequently present that to the public for their feedback. And with that, I am done, and I could take any questions. Thank you.
Staff want to add anything before we do our thing? No, I think we're ready. Okay, thank you very much. We'll take public comment first. Is there anyone online who'd like to make comments on this item? No public comment online. Is there anybody in the audience who would like to just run up here and make public comment? Seeing that, I'm going to close public comment, and I'm going to open it for input from committee members, and I will start with Lulu.
I don't have questions for this. Oh, I don't have question for this segment.
Well, thank you very much. Olin?
No questions.
Patrick?
Very informative.
Thank you for the report. I don't have any questions either.
Thank you for the report. No, for, I guess, full disclosure for everyone. First thing is that, I'm actually going to be starting work at TMD next month. That's why this is my last meeting with the Citizens Advisory Committee. So wanted to full disclosure on that, but I did coordinate with both TMD and YoloTD here and just verify that I am able to participate in the discussion tonight. I don't have to recuse myself. But with that, I guess one very brief suggestion on the environmental sustainability goal. Is just for reducing SOB travel as that performance measure continues to be developed. I would suggest also just continue thinking of that. There's no such thing as like a transit dependent or captive rider. So as opposed to just looking at people who previously drove or might be like a demographic considered more likely to drive. Just considering all ridership and considering that risk that even someone who rides now might not have as much of a history of driving, there would be a risk that if service were to degrade, that they could switch to driving. So in that role, transit, even if it's someone who hasn't driven much in the past, transit's still playing a role in helping the environment if people are riding of any demographic.
That is a good point. Thank you.
I have a couple. So one, I would just go back to the Citizen Advisory Committee framework. And I think it's long been the CAC's notion that you need to use fixed route as the backbone and have that feed in with your transportation demand management. So I think the preliminary findings really support where the CAC has been for a long time. The other thing I didn't actually notice, but I hope gets addressed, is more of the intersection between bicycles, e-bikes, and transit, and how we're accommodating those. What's especially in line with the CAC's values on meeting people where they are and getting them where they need to go and getting that last mile.
And that is a good point. The survey bore that out, which is, the most common way that people were actually getting to and from the bus were by walking and biking. So any improvements there will play a key role in improving the quality of life for people that use Yolo bus services.
Thank you. Any last comments? I hear.
Can I just piggyback on one
Yes.
thing? One thing I've noticed is that some of these folks on scooters and electric bikes are riding without helmets, and it just seems crazy. They're going at high speed, relative high speeds. And so I don't know, that may not be an issue of ours or pertinent to this report, but when you made your comments, it seemed to me that it's something that somebody needs to pay some attention to.
Hospital ER surgeons are supporting you right now all over America. It does bring up the issue though about making sure that you've got places to park those city scooters and bikes when you're getting to the transit stop, and or have people who are going to be parking their bike as one would park their car to take the bus when they're not actually going to take it with them, and making sure that we think about those amenities in our planning. Go Patrick.
Well, I wasn't necessarily gonna take a conversation there, but since it's arrived, I had a thought the other day that, like a public education campaign or even wayfinding signage about, how to travel on those devices could be really helpful, and I think, I see people, walk and run with traffic and bike and scoot against it, and I think that it's like they're partially there, they're supposed to go against the flow in one of the things, but not sure like necessarily which one. And somebody very simply broke it down for me recently that like a vessel with like a 10-year-old person or older is considered a vehicle and should act accordingly. And I don't know if that's totally true, but like some sign to that effect in a bike lane or on shared infrastructure could be really helpful. Especially as we put together a trails plan and so on. Those wayfinding signage could include those tips for safe use, considerate use, and also lawful use of all these new things that are kind of rolling out before regulation catches up to them.
No pun intended.
Since Patrick's going to wayfinding, I am a very big proponent of signage that emulates how light rail maps routes and access points, and totally believe that that's completely apropos to buses as much as it is to rail. And I think a lot more people would ride if they showed up at the bus stop and they could say, oh, hey, this takes me to X. Which you can't do now, so it's like it's an act of faith, if you're a novice bus rider. But people very quickly figure out how to ride BART or MARTA or the one in DC, because the maps are ubiquitous and the stops are all delineated and people can see visually where they're going. And I think that has a lot to do with ridership comfort. And so anything improved in signage is fabulous. Go ahead.
The one thing along those lines is that, and I think the best practice I've ever seen in terms of wayfinding is when I did a study overseas in South Korea, and that's really where I first got into, became a big transit rider and got my passion developed about this issue. But there, like every bus stop had every stop of essentially it would be similar to a rail app, where they would have like every stop listed for every bus line, and then you could also easily see like where it connected with the subway too. So that's the best practice I've ever seen in terms of transit.
If you actually are just walking in downtown DC, the entire ridership map is actually outside of stations before you even get into the station. It's really quite simple and elegant, and really helps people decide to ride it. I think transit's overdue for that. Any last comments from people? Andy?
There's one final data point just from the packet that really struck me was I think that the 215 has like restored like 92% of its pre-pandemic ridership, which is pretty amazing because I believe it's still only running about 2/3 of the service as it did pre-pandemic. Which I can imagine is creating, that's not a route I use as much, but I imagine that's probably creating some crowding issues. So I could see, I would suggest that as an important thing to look at as potential investment in that route as this moves forward. As well as, of course, the 220.
All right, any last input? You have everything you need from us.
I think so.
Yes. Thank you to TMD for the presentation. Really appreciated that. Thank you, staff. This item is closed.
Thank you very much.
That takes us on to item 8, administrative reports. I think CAC members go first. So Lulu, you had an original question earlier that wasn't part of the agenda. Would you like to ask that now?
Oh, hi, everyone. So since this is my first CAC meeting, I don't know much about what we have done, and so I hope my question is not redundant or anything. I was just wondering if there's any proposed plan or potential plan to add a route from UC Davis to Arden Fair Mall in the city of Sacramento.
So that's not currently, the short range transit plan that we just discussed. I mean, that is the next conversation that we'll have with the CAC. Will be looking at a potential scenarios for service changes and expansion. And so that's that would be an opportunity to have that conversation. And I also just want to say that, like, we're so glad you're here, and there's a lot of these folks have been on this committee a long time. And so, it's great to ask questions. It's great to have new ideas, and please don't hesitate to ask those questions. If there's anything I can do, offhand to help give you some background, I think I'm happy to do that. Sure.
Yep, super excited to have you, and it's always good to get new input and new ideas.
Yeah, welcome.
Oh, thank you.
Olin,
Yes,
you
Andy?
wanted bug Andy.
congratulations and good luck in your new adventure.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's terrific. And then Brian, another departure is Brian from the Yolo Pack. And I announced at the last meeting that someone will be taking his place. Brian's done a great job there. And like to encourage the participation of YCTD on that committee. It's kind of a stretch in a way to have transit participate, but it's absolutely important as far as I'm concerned. And Brian's been really done a good job at bringing us on board with different things that relate to transit. Thank you, Brian. And you'll be missed.
Not leaving yet. It's once the Yolo County Climate Action Commission starts having meetings, then that's when I'll start going to those. In the meantime, Lola will be substituting for me, and you know how capable she is, so there shouldn't be a drop off in value.
Glad to hear it. A great representative of the agency and of the executive officer. So. Let's see, lemons are available back there, folks. Please take some. We've got wheelbarrow full at home. If you like more, if you like them and you want more, just let me know. And then streamlined bus out front. What was that all about? Looked like a demo. It was a beautiful bus out there.
Okay, yeah, so our Causeway Connection vehicles, these are our Proteras, they're our battery electric vehicles. Most of them have said Causeway Connection. That company's gone bankrupt. It's very hard to service the vehicles. We don't trust them on the highways as much anymore. So we're repainting them so that we can use them for Woodland Local Schools, where they stay closer to home.
Okay,
Sad story, but they do look beautiful, don't they?
they're good looking buses.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I don't know what they look like and feel like inside.
They're very quiet, which is really nice. It's unfortunate about the company going out of business because there's now just 2 battery electric bus manufacturers and the wait time to get vehicles is 3 years.
Thank goodness. And then the last thing, kind of related to the budget is resumption of state workers. We talked about that a little bit last time. You think that's gonna help the budget or hurt the budget?
Well, we're certainly glad that we restored the additional express routes from Davis to Woodland, from Davis to downtown Sacramento when we did in January. We were behind for the executive order to go to 3 days a week, but we were ahead of the curve for the executive order to go to 4 days a week, so. Yeah, so glad that we have that service restoration in place, which should hopefully help a lot.
And that'll help the budget, I would think.
Yeah, we do charge a premium fare for our express services, so we do recover more fare box revenue from those than from our other services.
Cool.
Any other CAC member reports?
This is a couple quick things. So first is a question following up on Olin's comment about the Proteras. Is that I'm actually as a rider, and also ties into the state worker issue as well, as a rider of the 43. It's one thing I've a couple of times I've actually seen. I've actually been on Proteras that have served that route and have used and still do use the highway to get into Sacramento. And then also, like, I guess was one other thing I wanted to bring up with that service is that it wasn't those runs specifically, but there have been a number of times I just noticed those buses have been late, like leaving their origin just to start their run. So I just wanted to ask if there is like some sort of like maintenance issue that might be affecting that service and like requiring the Proteras to be used for it.
So, yeah, I should clarify that, not all the Proteras are in such bad shape, but there's some that it's hard for us to get parts, I'll put it that way. So some of them are better off closer to home, but some of them are still in fine shape, but we're being cautious about them. In terms of particular service, I wish I could say that that was a maintenance issue. I think it really just has to do with some of the longstanding challenges we have. We've had a couple missed trips lately, which is not something that we're proud of. We've had a lot of driver turnover lately. We're kind of back to a place, I think, where we're seeing that our wages are no longer competitive. We're now losing a lot of drivers to the airport, which is interesting. I think the airport has been really impacted. So they've raised wages and they've been stealing our drivers lately, as opposed to SACRT, who's always stolen our drivers. So, no, I think that mostly has to do with driver shortages, to be perfectly blunt, and turnover. We're continuing to hire and recruit and train, but we've seen just recently some, an uptick in the challenges with retention.
Well, the airport has hired massive numbers of drivers because they closed all those parking lots. And moved everybody out to, there's literally a parking lot that you cannot walk to the airport terminals from. And they abandon you there at 11, but I'm not bitter. Yeah, middle of the night, awesome. Anyway, that's why, and they were very short on drivers, so I am sure they're paying a premium for those, so.
Thank you, and that's good to know. Along those lines, I feel there was a different run of the 43 I was on not too long ago, where it looked like I saw like a whole class, like a whole class of drivers was doing like a ride along on that bus, so that was a really good thing to see. But I do appreciate the clarification of insight on what is going on with that service, so very much. But then my regular update on the Davis Transportation Commission, I'll keep it very brief. So last month, though, we had a good discussion, there was a lot of public comment. There have been some traffic safety concerns on Fifth Street, like just east of downtown, between the railroad tracks and L Street, which I know is also a corridor that's served by the 42. There's a lot of public comment on that, and then the city does have plans to restrict turns from the side street, restrict left turns from the side street onto Fifth Street in response to that. So that's something to keep an eye on, since that is an important corridor for transit, the 42 specifically. So that, and then also, and also the city's general plan just kicked off. There was a meeting of all of the Davis commissions last month. That effort, but that'll be going on for a few years, but that effort is getting underway. The next meeting will be a week from today, May 12th at City Hall. So it's at 6 p.m. So invite you all to attend that. And that will actually be my last. That'll be my last commission meeting of any type here in Northern California for the time being before I move down south. But with that, of course, it's already been said that this is my last meeting, but it really has been an honor serving and working with you all. So I've learned a lot. Hope and definitely have enjoyed. I think we've done some great things. So been proud to be a part of it. So really appreciate learning from you all over the last several years, and hope to stay in touch.
Fabulous. And that takes us to your report. Oh, sorry, Patrick. Didn't mean to get you off.
No, it's okay. I'll try to make it brief. Just want to say thank you to Andy for everything. Congratulations. Welcome to Lula. Thanks for being here. Two things. One is I inquired with council member early in West Sacramento about a bench at one of the bus stops down Jefferson. I think it also dovetails to our conversation about signage, because if nothing else, and that's at Jefferson and Gateway. When I mentioned it to her in person, and then she reached out to me to follow up, and I couldn't remember the names of the streets, so I drove by it for days trying to find the sign and really struggled. So even while looking for it, so maybe some, at the very least, increased signage, I think could be helpful there.
A great map.
But with a map of the entire network. Somehow pointing people from the 220. Yeah, that was a thought, I think that I've seen people literally sitting on the curb on Jefferson Boulevard waiting for the bus there, which I wouldn't wish on anybody, so. Not that it's blowing the doors off the ridership, but anyhow, worth mentioning. The other thing is I reported last time at the last meeting, I was joining the board of SABA, Sacramento Area Bicycle Advocates. May is bike month, so ride and track miles. Take your bike on the bus, so on and so forth. They're looking into an e-bike voucher program at like a city level, because the statewide level rollout of the e-bike voucher program was just kind of not smooth, is my understanding. There are multiple city level e-bike voucher programs. Cities like Encino and others in Southern California have managed to figure it out. And I'm mentioning it in case that an opportunity comes across the desk of Yolo County Transit District, and anyhow, I think it's a great idea. So that's it for me. Thank you.
Sam, can you talk about that?
Sure, yeah, well, as part of May's Bike Month, for those of you who are not aware, YoloTD staffs and manages Yolo Commute, which is a nonprofit aimed at reducing single occupant vehicle commute trips, but really it's a transportation demand management program. For May's Bike Month, one of the things we do offer is not a voucher, but an incentive program for e-bikes up to $350. So if you're a Yolo Commute member, then you'd be eligible for that discount. We also have a partnership with YoloTD electric assist bikes where you get 10% off of their online price, but you have to buy your bike through one of three local vendors here in Yolo County. So we're doing a lot of work in that area. We're also applying to the Air Quality District's Clean Air Funds program to actually extend that to be a year-round e-bike incentive program. So yeah, we're really interested in that space. Obviously, I'm a big e-bike proponent myself, and I think that the more they can be promoted and the more that people can get casual experiences with them, like we have with our e-bike loan program, which we offer to our members, a fleet of 3 bikes, and they get to keep them for 3 months so that their employees just can have a non-pressurized experience with just taking them out and riding them around for a trip to lunch or something. So we have a lot of interest in that type of program, and me hoping that that'll be something that we can expand once we start receiving funding from the YoloTD Managed Lanes project towards the voluntary trip reduction program, which is something that has to be implemented per the EIR. So we'll stop there.
Thank you very much. Well, I do love my e-bike, so I highly recommend that. I would also say, when I was at Yolo Housing, we did a bike borrow program so people could get used to that. And I will say that infrastructure matters. And that when we were at the western end of town, there was really no safe riding at lunch that would make anybody happy to try and do that. It was really underutilized, whereas, you know, if you're in a sort of much slower sort of downtown place with a lot of infrastructure to support your biking, that's probably gonna be a lot more popular, but it just goes to the earlier discussion about why infrastructure matters on these bike lanes and bike access. Do I have one more? Did I hear one more?
Oh, you know, I just noticed, I'm probably not, I think you've got, well, we've got your comments, so.
No, we're gonna get to the executive director's report and then we're gonna adjourn, so we're just doing.
Forget it, I'll save my comment for your report.
It's all yours, Adam.
Great, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm gonna keep it brief tonight. I know we've had a long agenda. Thank you, everyone. We had a lot of important items tonight, all of which are moving forward very soon, so we wanted to make sure we gave you all this content. Thank you for staying present for so much content tonight, for offering us so much good feedback. We really, really appreciate you. So very briefly, I already thanked Andy, but I just want to say it again. So appreciate you. So sad you're leaving, and TMD, darn you. We're not, you know, we hire you and here's what you do. You steal one of our CAC members. But no, we wish you all the best in San Diego, Andy. And thank you so much for everything you've done, not just for YoloTD, but really here in Yolo County and Davis in general. So thank you. I'm going to miss having my TDA hawk. Couple other quick things, just in case you didn't know, you've all been reappointed to the CAC. I know that came up at the last meeting that a bunch of people's appointments had lapsed. We went ahead and did everybody, just because we couldn't actually find exactly, Olin, when you had been last appointed, and Lisa, when you had been last appointed, we couldn't find the record of it, so we just went ahead and reappointed everybody. So you're all now on new 4-year terms for as much of that term as you want to, and if you do need to step down at some point, let us know. You're not, you're not locked into those 4 years. We will let you leave if you need to, but you are now official. We will be recruiting now with Andy's departure. We still had 1 vacant at-large seat, so we will be doing a new round of outreach for recruitment. The recruitment's been open the whole time, but we haven't been advertising it for a while. So if you know anyone, if you could think of people, we're really trying to target particularly folks from West Sacramento and Woodland, where we again tend to be underrepresented, as well as the rural areas of the county. So please, if you have anyone in mind, let us know. And so speaking of outreach for that, we do have our new communications and marketing specialist. She started today. Her name is Haley Oster-Zelaya. We just got her from Civic Law. We're really lucky to have her and excited. So if you have, event requests or things you want us to publicize that we haven't been able to meet those requests for you, we now have some capacity in that space. So let us know, how we can best support you in that way. And Brian already mentioned May is Bike Month. I want to also just recognize Brenda and the team who's been doing so much work for our May is Bike Month incentive programs, where you get cash, not just for e-bikes, but also for fixing up your new bike or buying a new regular bike. We opened actually that incentive program April 1st, and we are already basically out of incentives because this is the fastest we've ever run out of that money, because there's just been so much interest and so much publicity. And Brenda and the team were out there at Loopalooza this weekend with the crazy windstorm blowing in their faces, making sure they were cheering on everybody who was out riding their bikes. And I know they've got more events to come. So get involved. NorCalGo is the app. If you want to get those incentives, now is the time to do it. And I'll just go ahead and go right into the long range calendar. At our next meeting, we have the SRTP. We'll be coming back to you to talk about draft recommendations, potential service change scenarios, and also how we're planning to get outreach on that. And also we'll be providing a very substantive update on the YOLO 80 managed lanes, our traffic and revenue forecast that really estimates how much revenue we think we're going to be able to generate from the new lanes. We'll be sharing that, as well as the equity planning. We're kind of at the starting gate of our equity planning process, and we'll have some information based on initial outreach and initial analysis that we've done that we want to get your feedback on. And then our next meeting scheduled for August somehow, I guess that's just how the timing worked out. I think we weren't able to do an early September meeting, so we're doing it in late August. We'll be talking to you about our long-term capital improvement plan, and also an update on our multimodal program and Yolo commute, which we just heard a little bit about from Brian. And then more to come as we build out our long-range calendar for the next fiscal year. Thank you. Questions on any of that?
Just FYI, I'm probably gonna miss the August meeting.
Okay.
And I know you may have manipulated things so that we didn't have it the early part of September, because I've got an annual trip, but I've got another unanticipated trip, the end of August.
Thank you for letting us know.
So about what I could do in August is make a meeting sometime at the very end of the month. But you don't need to make any changes for me necessarily. I'm just letting you know.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Great meeting. Appreciate all the information. Bittersweet, because I just got a new vice chair and he's dumping me.
Yeah, sweet, yeah, it was a great one. At least I got to soak it in for one.
Yeah, do we need to add that to the agenda for an upcoming meeting, so appointing a new vice chair?
We do.
Okay, we'll put that on the agenda for the next meeting.
That sounds good. And with that, I will adjourn this meeting in honor of Andy Carrillo and his many years of service.
Thank you.
Thank you.